Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John Dehlin. It is November 25th, 2025, and we're here for it. We're here for Season 3 of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, being shown on Hulu. For those who have been living in a cave somewhere or haven't been following Mormon stories, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is probably the hottest show on all of streamed media, possibly, but it's huge, and it's all about Mormon women who basically live in Utah, Mormon or ex-Mormon women who live in Utah. We've covered it a few times on the show in the past. Season 3's just released, and what might be different about how we approach here at Mormon Stories, Secret Lives versus other channels is we're Mormons or ex-Mormons reacting to the show, focusing on kind of the Mormon angle or the Mormon perspective. And I'm not aware of other people really doing that, except for Hayley, who actually has these people on her show, right, Hayley?
Some of them, yes.
So have you guys covered Secret Lives, Samantha?
Well, it's been tough because Tanner refuses to watch it. But I did just film a video with my friend Aurora at the weekend.
All right. And Aurora, should I know who that is?
She's called Aurora McCausland, just like a Utah influencer.
Oh, okay. Well, that's Samantha from Zelph on the Shelf. And of course, we have Hayley Rawle from Girls Camp. Do you call it a podcast or YouTube channel? Or what do you call
Girls
it?
Camp podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have Alyssa. Oh, I don't want to use the wrong name. Alyssa Whitbeck?
Yeah.
We have Alyssa Whitbeck back.
Hello.
On Mormon Stories. Welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. All right. So we only did one episode on season 2. Should I feel ashamed or embarrassed about that?
Only like a little, I think.
That was too short. I don't have anything quick to say in response. So anyway. I should also say I'm so excited for the first time, I think, to have joining us from an undisclosed satellite Mormon Stories office somewhere in the UK. We have Brooklyn Alden, who is our video editor, but she's so into Mormon pop culture, I forced Brooklyn to join us. Hey, Brooklyn Alden.
Hello, you're absolutely correct. I love reality TV and ex-Mormonism, so I'm happy to join this one.
Well, is this Brooklyn? I have a horrible memory sometimes. So have you ever appeared on any Mormon Stories episode ever?
Not once ever, not once. No, but Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is what will take me out and bring me out into the public for. So yes, first time.
And you've been working for Mormon Stories, what, 5 years, 6 years? How many years?
About 5 years, yeah.
How have you escaped coming on the show in 5 years?
With great complication. I like to be behind the computer after the filming has taken place, but I really enjoy all of your Secret Lives of Mormon Wives episodes, so happy to be here as like the Greek chorus to this one,
That's a literature reference. Somebody help me out. What is the Greek chorus? You're British.
These two seem like they would know that.
Sorry, obscure reference already, but that's like in the Greek theater when you have the audience on the stage to help the real audience know how to react. So I'm just reacting to you guys.
You're already giving these super sophisticated takes, Brooklyn. I love it. All right. Well, we want to also welcome our live audience. It's super fun to have you. We hope to incorporate comments or questions. The best way to show your comment or question is through Super Chat. That helps support us financially, and it also helps your comments stand out amongst all the other comments. Really quickly, Mormon Stories exists because of the generous donations of our viewers and listeners. If you're a donor, thank you. We couldn't do it without you. If you're not a donor and you value this content, you can go to mormonstories.org/donate, become a monthly donor, and we'll keep providing this content. All right. So our plan is to have 2 episodes on season 3. I'm a little worried there's too much.
There's a lot.
Right?
We almost need an episode per episode,
Yeah.
but maybe we can control ourselves a little.
Oh, wait, a 3 or 4 hour episode per episode?
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
would-
Above it.
I think we did that for season 1.
Yeah, we did.
We went hard on season one. We left
Yeah.
no stone unturned.
Absolutely.
Well, anyway, today is part 1 of an undetermined number of episodes on season 3 of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Really quickly, Brooklyn, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, or do you want to remain mysterious and anonymous?
I can share a little bit about myself. I don't mind. Yeah, I'm not too private. So my name's Brooklyn Alden. I grew up primarily in Park City, Utah. So right in the middle of Mormonism. I grew up, as I would call it, very Orthodox Mormon. And I left the church. My whole family left the church when I was 18 years old. So this year is actually my 10th year out of the church.
Whoa.
And yeah, I've worked for John for the last 5 years. And I will say that I think the church looks very different in the 10 years since I've been out. So it's interesting to watch this stuff and see what it's like now.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's super fun. It's great to have you. Alyssa, remind us a little bit about you.
I'm Alyssa. I like reality TV. I teach university English. I'm a writer. I have an essay that was just published in Exponent that kind of talks about motherhood. So that ties in here just a little bit. And I'm just happy to chat.
And you're a double mom, is that right?
I am. Yeah, I just had my second.
And have you been on since having your second?
No, this is my
Okay.
inaugural. I
Welcome-
had
welcome back.
him like a week after we see this. That's partially why we didn't finish season 2 because
You had a baby.
I had a baby. Yeah.
Well, congrats. Great to have you back.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Really quickly, Hayley, do you want to remind us who you are?
Of course. So as John said, I have a podcast called Girls Camp Podcast, a YouTube channel. Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is really my bread and butter because I love talking about Mormonism. I love talking about the overlap between Mormonism and influencer culture, especially. And I'm also a former Mormon wife and mother myself, like Alyssa.
Wait, you're not a former wife and you're not a former mother, right?
I'm a former Mormon wife and Mormon mother.
Okay.
Still a wife and mother.
Okay.
No longer Mormon.
Well,
Good clarification.
In ex-Mormon internet culture, you never know. So
True. Very true.
had to make that clarification. Sammy, tell us about you. Remind us.
I'm one half of Zelph on the Shelf. I am ex-Mormon. I also used to be a Mormon wife. And I'm not a mother, but I love reality TV.
Well, you're wiser than many moms I know. How's that?
It's really nice of you to say, John.
Great to have you back.
Yeah, great to be back.
All right. Well, now that we've done introductions, Alyssa, we're going to have you kind of be the guide for today. I'm going to run the camera and y'all can call on me when you wish. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Hey, sounds good. So let's just start we're doing episodes 1 through 5 right now, as much as we can. Let's just start in the juiciest part of the first half of the season in Jessi's affair. So a lot of what we see just at the beginning of Jessi's relationship is Layla confronting Jessi in the car. I think it was at an influencer event or something like that. Because Marciano had told her that he had sex with Jessi. So Layla confronts Jessi to see if that's actually true. She immediately confesses to having an affair. She says she kissed him twice. She says that they had an emotional affair for a couple of weeks, but she is adamant that they didn't have sex. And this becomes a really big storyline. So what do you want to say just about this, like the first episode, our initial thoughts on the affair, on Jessi's take on everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think this, as we see this all unfold, we learn a lot about patriarchy. We learn a lot about gender dynamics within Mormon culture, within Mormon marriages. I think at the very beginning, the first thing that comes to mind in this initial, when we're finding out about the affair, is that Jessi is honest about it. She comes out and says, yes, there was an affair. It was exactly this. The sex part was not true. She seems willing to talk about it, take ownership. And
Jordan's words?
For using, her husband Jordan's words. And she seems like I think it's just important to mention that she really owns up to it and seems like she's working on taking accountability and moving forward from that point.
Any other panelists responses to that initial disclosure?
Like, how did we feel?
So, obviously in the early promos for Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, the word soaking would come up. And, I think of soaking as just a placeholder for this idea of like Mormon sex versus Mormon not sex. And so she's claiming she didn't have sex, but she had an emotional affair, but they kissed. Didn't he say that there was some stains on his shorts? And so like for me, that introduced this whole idea of, were they trying to do that very Mormon Provo, BYU, Rexburg kind of thing, where they were trying to like have as much enjoyment as they could without technically violating some sort of boundary? Am I making this up, or was that there?
Was it in the first episode where he said, "Oh, I just thought we had sex because there was a cum stain in my underwear"? Sorry, a cum stain on Mormon Stories podcast.
You're the first.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, was it that episode?
It was
Yeah.
the
It
first
was
and the
one.
second.
It was
but
one. It was
yeah,
one.
Okay.
we can keep
Okay.
going.
Were you going to say something, Brooklyn?
Oh, I just loved the cum stain reference on Mormon Stories. That's definitely first. I've seen a lot of episodes. Yeah, there's like a Monica Lewinsky situation going on now. We're gonna have to figure out.
I do think a through line that we see with this affair that we saw in the past 2 seasons of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is there seems like there's this really intense need to have like very specific details of things that have happened if it is of a sexual nature. And I feel like that comes out in this affair as well, because Marciano claimed there was sex, Jessi claims there wasn't sex. And so you have all these people getting into like the nitty gritty sexual details, which is kind of, harkens back to the initial swinging scandal when there was so much talk about what exactly happened physically. And to me, that rings very Mormon, because it is similar to sitting down in a bishop's office and having to say with exact specificity what happened. And I think that, obviously on reality TV, I think they kind of play into the salacious details, but I also think there's something Mormon about that, of needing to know exactly what happened.
Doesn't it seem like there's more curiosity about the specifics of that than like, okay, what was the emotional environment you were in to make you make those decisions? Like, that's what seems more interesting to me.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
there's a lot of focus on just like the specifics of the sexual activity.
Yeah. And I think kind of like what you were saying, John, about how we're like relating this back to the linguistic arguments that we tend to do in Mormonism on what is sex, what is, and how far can you go before you have to talk to your bishop? Can we go right up to that line? And then when you're talking with the bishop, you have to be really specific about what you did. And, depending upon your answers, that will determine your role in the repentance process. It just feels very checklist item. And it seems like that is what a lot of the women and the men in this season are more comfortable talking about, which is interesting. They're more comfortable reading these, salacious texts out loud, confessing really openly with each other, but they're much more vague and much more protective of sharing like the emotional problems and the environment of that. It seems like that's the line that they're not willing to cross, but everything else is open on the table, because that seems like that's something that everyone deserves to know. And I guess we'll get to this in a minute too, but just like this need for not only Jessi to confess, but for the other women to find out like the capital T truth, and that it's their job as a friend to be able to determine the capital T truth in order to then proceed on what the next steps are. And so, this also does feel just very reminiscent of like how we react in Mormonism to sexual disclosures, and how we almost have to like open our handbook and say, okay, if you did have sex, I'll act this way. If you didn't have sex, I'll act this way. And I'm very familiar.
And can I ask, does it matter if they had, it sounds like they're trying to avoid intercourse, but they're still having sexual or relationship of some level. All of us have been in committed relationships. Does it matter? Is an emotional affair less significant than an actual sexual affair? Or is emotional affair worse than an actual sexual affair? Should it matter to, is it Jordan, whether or not they did or didn't? Like, is that even like, I think it might not be a Mormon question, but I think it's an important thing. I'd love to hear people's perspective on that.
I feel like every couple kind of has their own ideas about what would constitute an emotional affair. But also I'm like, if you kissed, it kind of isn't an emotional affair, you know? I suppose they kissed and then it went on to be just emotional. But you know, couples have all kinds of lines when it comes to what's an emotional affair. Because, I mean, really an emotional affair is like you're seeking inappropriate closeness with someone outside your relationship, but we all need emotional closeness. So it makes sense that would be something you would do if you're being emotionally abused, as Jessi said she has been for years. That seems like an inevitable outcome, to be honest, like seeking emotional closeness in other ways when you can find it.
And this isn't a nitpick, Samantha. Isn't it totally possible to have an emotional affair without kissing at all?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm saying
okay.
the kissing to me makes it, I mean, more of a affair.
Okay.
You know?
Oh, I see.
I think that the emotional affair is interesting here too, because what we do know is that they kissed and then that they sexted, essentially, which is being referred to as an emotional affair. We don't get so much insight onto like how emotionally close they did become.
Right.
But I do think the terminology is interesting here, as we were saying, with the semantics of everything, because when you're throwing these terms around, especially when you're talking about a context where, you know, Jessi, she got married very young in the temple. She left her first marriage and very quickly ended up marrying Jordan. So I think you also have these dynamics of, yes, these are women in their 20s, early 30s, but some of the behaviors, and I don't say this, I say this as someone who also is in this group of people, but I feel like a lot of it felt very almost high school to me, like the kinds of questions it was bringing up, even the terminology that was being used. It felt less like an adult affair and more like kind of a situation that might unfold in high school or in early college years. And I think that makes sense. That's just indicative of the life path that most of these people have been on, where they didn't have exploration. So to me, I also see this in a lot of ways as maybe people wanting to explore in ways that they didn't before, but, you know, now they're married and have children.
Yeah, I mean, I think as Mormons, unfortunately, we're all just so sexually stunted. And I think it comes out not just in the behaviors, but just in the conversations, the way that sex is talked about, the way that relationships are talked about, the fact that these people are navigating serious trauma, serious relationships, all while they're caring for multiple children, and some of them are 25 years old. Like, there's just so many factors at play here that I think also make it more difficult for them to be able to navigate in healthy, emotionally developed ways. But I do think also that part of what you were saying, John, about like, does it matter? I think I agree with what you're saying, Sam. Like, it depends upon each person's relationship, whether, you know, their definition of both a physical or an emotional affair. But I do think once you bring to camera that a woman not only had an affair, but had a sexual affair, had sex, that raises the stakes a lot, just as far as like the reception publicly about, you know, what the response is going to be about a woman who had sex, and kind of the scarlet letter that's going to go on her, that already was going to, you know, she was going to have for stepping outside of her marriage in any capacity. And then you add sex. And I think that just the weight of that for women in particular is really heavy. And to me, I think that was, at least my assumption was, that was what a lot of the panic was coming from for Jessi, was, you know, not only is, I don't know if Jordan believes me or if he doesn't believe me, but now everybody is going to see me in a very dark light, even darker than they probably already were. And I imagine that's terrifying.
Yeah, she also says, I mean, I think it's in the very first episode, she says something like, I kind of found it a little funny, but she said, you know, in the Mormon culture specifically, an affair is really bad, which I think, I mean, I guess the reason I found it a bit silly is because it's like, I think generally speaking, that's something that, you know, societally, there's a lot of shame attached to and things like that. However, I do think that's a salient point, which is, because of how taboo sex is, especially for women, there is this added layer of shame. So I think even for Jessi's sake, she did seem, and I understandably so, she wanted it to be known, we did not have sex, we only kissed, because I think that will affect inevitably how she's judged, especially by Mormons or Mormon adjacent people.
if I can, I don't mean to nitpick. I wrote this down. She actually wrote infidelity. That she said infidelity is definitely frowned upon. In the church. Why are you laughing?
Faux pas.
Why are you laughing?
Because of course it is, right?
Not just frowned upon. Like you get excommunicated. You can get this
Yeah.
fellowship. Like it's a sin next to murder, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
so what? How do we make sense of her just going, oh yeah, it's not the best thing to do in Mormonism?
My take on a lot of those lines are like the producer's like, okay, how can we get the Mormon angle? What does the Mormon church think about cheating? And she's like, well, yeah, it's definitely frowned upon.
Frowned upon.
Which, yeah, that's
Frowned
thank you
upon.
for that exact line because I did chuckle a little because I was like, yeah, to say the very least.
But I bet they're in that interview booth for like 10 hours, just
Oh,
answering question
100%.
after question.
Oh,
and
of course.
yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Brooklyn, let's get you.
Yeah.
You have a comment? Or?
No, I have to say I totally agree with those last comments, and I almost felt like her emphasizing over and over, it was an emotional affair, if you want to call it that, came across to me as her trying to like downplay the affair when, like John was saying earlier, to some people in some relationships, potentially even my own marriage, like I feel like an emotional affair would almost even be more hurtful to me in certain scenarios, so it just felt like a lot of downplaying and trying to draw a clear line of like, oh, it didn't go this far, it wasn't sex all this way, and I also thought it was interesting, John, the comparison you're making to the culture in Mormonism about where do we draw the line of what is sex and what is not, and I definitely see an element of that in a lot of her responses and kind of what I'm imagining her mental process was through the whole interaction with Marciano. I feel like there was a lot of that going on.
Really quickly, roll call, and only for those who want to answer. You have two choices. Spouse has sex with another person or spouse falls in love with another person. Do either of you have one you would prefer?
I've debated this heavily amongst my friend group, and I usually am the odd man out because I feel like I would be hurt more by a sexual affair. But I feel like I'm usually alone in that. So I'm curious what.
And it could
what
be a
thoughts
partner,
are.
not spouse. Just
Yeah.
to be clear. So,
I think I would be hurt more by an emotional affair. I think we're the opposite on
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah, I feel like that tends to be which is understandable. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Spouse, if you're listening, don't take that as permission.
Neither, please. But
Well, Jessi didn't fall in love with someone else. Just, it wasn't those two options for her.
no, I
will
know. I
say.
was just
Okay.
for the sake of the conversation.
For the sake of going on air.
Even though theoretically, I think love is abundant and non-exclusive, I do think it'd be much more challenging if my partner fell in love with someone else than had sex with someone else. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
All right, Brooklyn,
Yeah.
do you want to answer? You don't have to.
I think that was a beautiful way to put it, Samantha, and I think I agree with that statement. I probably don't want either to be happening. I personally would be more hurt by him falling in love with someone else.
Yeah, I think I'm fall in love.
see,
Mhm.
told you.
Especially if it was
I'm always
more than
alone in
me,
this.
Like, I want to be number one. That's kind of the main.
All right. Okay. Sorry if I derailed, but this is thank you for your patience with me.
That was great.
We like
Okay,
when you derail.
so they discussed this. Things are bad. Jessi lets us know that she told Jordan immediately. Well, by told, he looked through her phone. He found out things weren't going well.
Is she a reliable narrator?
I think so.
Okay.
I think she might be like
honest
Yeah.
to me in this.
she seems like an overly like a very earnest narrator at
Okay.
least, where she I don't think she leaves out any details.
It is not hard to believe that he went through her phone.
Yeah. But regardless, Jordan is understandably upset. So he learned a new word, emasculated, and he's excited to use this frequently, which I'm sure we'll dissect in a moment. So he turns to his good buddy Dakota for some emotional support to confide in. So we have a clip kind of this conversation, a little bit of it, and what their take is on the whole thing.
All right. We'll roll the video.
Super emasculating.
100%. It would do the same to me. Jordan's growing up Mormon too. The men are the providers. That's what he's always seen his whole life. Now it's completely opposite. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great. But I just think for a man, that adds another layer of feeling not enough.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's great, actually. It's totally fine.
Awesome to be rich. Don't get me wrong.
No, there's so much laughing and head shaking and
Yeah.
cringing. Articulate it, voice it.
the fact that his wife becoming the primary breadwinner is kind of even a factor in the conversation for him, I just think is telling.
Why?
Because it's like your family came into an enormous amount of wealth that you get to benefit from. But for some reason, obviously it's showing that these Mormon men do feel emasculated by not being the ones to earn the most money.
What do you think he means by
Which
emasculated?
I think that is emasculating. I think being bothered by it is more emasculating than,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I'm glad Dakota called it out so explicitly, because Jordan, from the very first clip of him talking about this affair, even to Jessi, he kept saying, I feel so emasculated. I feel so emasculated. And even if he didn't say it as many times as he did, that seems to me an odd word, an odd initial reaction or hill to die on when it comes to an affair. And I think Dakota pointed it out, which is there is already an insecurity there. There's already an insecurity around masculinity that this affair is then exacerbating. And I wonder if the roles were reversed, if potentially his language would have been different, because if he was in a position of financial control in his family, the way that Jessi is, then, his response might have been, oh, well, I do this, this, and this for you, and I do this, this, and this for the family, and this is how I'm thanked. But instead it's, oh, this is so emasculating to me. And I think that just goes to show that he likely was feeling that way already.
And it kind of shows how fragile their ideas about masculinity are. That how manly you are is affected by how much money you make, or if your wife cheats on you or not. I feel like masculinity can be something more intrinsic and healthy than that can't be shaken
so easily. And he seemed more concerned. And granted, I'm sure there's a million caveats that they were working through this already. But he seemed to be particularly concerned about everybody knowing about the affair. And he mentions that quite a few times, that was one of the things that he was really paranoid about. And a lot of it, I think, does come down to perception that he's going to be seen as less of a man, that manliness is somehow defined by your wife only wanting to have sex with you or being dependent upon you financially, and that both of those things are challenging his own manliness. And he mentions at one point, he said, I don't want to be seen as less of a man because I chose to stay around, when they're talking about working things together, which is really interesting. Wow. That to brush her off would somehow be a way to be considered more manly. And he talks a little bit about how he's worried about what his son in particular thinks about this. It does seem like there's so much combined here about sex and manliness and financial prowess that really come together. And she's challenging all of those things. And that seems to be a lot of what his sense of self is built upon.
And even though I understand him being hurt, I feel like if he really loved her deeply, you'd be concerned about this affair coming to light, because she is going to get destroyed by, the internet, the world. I feel like there should be some level of concern for her. If you're on a reality TV show and your wife has an affair, generally the audience is going to be sympathetic to you. But she's the woman in the situation, with the scarlet letter.
Yeah.
I've never used that before. Anyway, yeah, he just doesn't seem concerned about her at all, which, again, I understand that her is not,
Well, I think to that point as well, talking so much about how emasculated he feels like such an external concern of how people are going to perceive him, perceive his relationship, perceive the way his partner in his relationship sees him. And yes, we did see some tears. We did see him grappling a bit with this, but it felt like most of his grappling was, what is the world going to think of me and think of us, as opposed to, I love this woman and I'm devastated because I trusted her. He's not even really talking in that way. He's more so talking about what is the perception and the feedback going to be. And I think that's also really telling, because it shows where his priorities are, as opposed to, I love this person and I'm really devastated about what this might mean for our relationship.
Are we saying that he cares more about what people think than what's actually going on in his life and in his relationship. Is that what we're saying?
It seems so. I think it's also worth mentioning, of course, they are on a TV show. So there's a lot of talk of that, of like, okay, now this is brought up on TV. So now we're going to have to deal with this publicly, which absolutely is valid. That's a different thing than dealing with privately. But even still, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we hear him at all talking about like his personal feelings about it beyond on that level of perception.
Yeah, it's obvious that they didn't have this sort of beautiful, close bond that was fractured by this event. It's like it was maybe more of an externally focused relationship to begin with before it happened, which does feel pretty like patriarchal marriage culture.
I mean, this may be a hot take, but like I almost see this entire franchise in some ways as a metaphor for Mormon emphasis on appearance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because so much of this series is about how they're looking. And I know that in my Mormon experience, so many of the most high profile families in any given Mormon ward, you find out they look perfect on Sunday, perfect clothes, perfect hair, perfect behavior, even the bishop and the bishop's family. But then you go home and it's a wreck. And so not a lot of integrity, kind of relationship and or familial or even interpersonal or personal integrity between who you really are when you're not in the public Mormon gaze and how you present when you show up at a ward or in this case on international television.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's the whole tension of the show. And I think that's a huge reason why it's such a success is because when people think of Mormon Wives, they think of these women on TikTok who look stunning, who are freshly postpartum, but dancing with their friends and they all have their partners and it appears one way. And then I think the impetus for the show ultimately was when Taylor Frankie Paul said, actually, we've been swinging. And that is crazy to an outsider who sees Mormonism as this very shiny, curated thing. And I think the show has just continued to kind of explore the inside workings of something that to an outside perspective, even within the community, is oftentimes a very shiny, curated facade.
And I think part of what makes our community so messy is kind of these two tensions that we've been talking about, this hyper awareness of appearance, having everything seeming curated and perfect and clean and nice and pretty. And also we have this like hyper compulsion to confess and that everybody needs to know everything. And it seems like for so much of this show, we're balancing both of those tensions. Like first, Jessi and Jordan were trying to keep everything under wrap. They were trying to not even let their close friends know that there were any problems. They were trying to be very private about it. But then once it opened, the floodgates opened and Jessi was willing to almost like word vomit everything and was hoping to somehow receive like redemption or forgiveness from everybody based on that. And so I think in all of these relationships, it seems like there's really no like balance of understanding like appropriate levels of sharing in different conversations or how we can kind of like navigate these relationships in a more balanced friendship way. It's either I'm going to pretend like everything's perfectly fine or I'm going to drive 3 hours to investigate and take a lie detector test. There's
no in between.
Exactly, no nuance here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you guys are all saying. And I think Jessi even directly addressed this and said how she's been masking it for years and they've been acting like it's perfect. But she mentions multiple times how there hasn't been a day that they have gone without arguments. And yet they just want to keep like putting on a smile and continuing to act like everything's perfect and beautiful. And I just totally agree. It's such a Mormon thing that happens. And I think it's interesting that Jessi has actually been one of the few to be open about the fact that she, I think, doesn't believe anymore and, you know, has separated herself from the church, doesn't consider herself a member anymore. And yet so much of that lingers in your behavior. And I just find that interesting.
I was just about to say that. I think it's important we call out they are ex-Mormon, Jessi and her husband, Jordan. And that had me thinking and reflecting a lot because, yeah, I've spoken to Jessi and she is definitely ex-Mormon. And yet still the impact of the upbringing as well as being so entrenched in, they're still friends with active Mormons. They're still living in Provo, Utah. And so it is interesting to think about, I guess, kind of the lasting power of the culture and of the messaging, because even being ex-Mormon, we're seeing a lot of these same Mormon dynamics coming out.
And sort of the scaffolding of her life, because she entered into this Mormon marriage with kids when she was Mormon. It's like, it's still Mormon patriarchy. So she's still kind of having to live in that system, even though she's left it. It's still the structure of her whole life.
Yeah.
I do want to just mention briefly about Jordan. I'm there are very few things I'm finding that are uniquely Mormon. You know what I mean? I think I like to say the Mormon experience is the human experience in many ways, but it might be worth calling out that in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there's this document that we've talked about in Mormon Stories called the Family Proclamation, and in there it says a husband or a father's role is to preside and provide. And so I guess we could say, where do Jordan's feelings come from? He probably doesn't choose his feelings to feel emasculated. I don't know if, I don't know to what extent he really even means that word per se, but what I can take from that for sure is that he feels crappy. And he feels crappy because if he's presiding, what does that mean if his wife's stepping out? And then if she's the one that's providing in a Mormon context, he could easily just have these feelings like, I'm failing as a Mormon man based on the family proclamation and on cultural expectations for what men are supposed to be. He comes by that honestly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's partially why, in some ways, the entire conversation that this series has about breaking the patriarchy feels like regressive. I would imagine people outside of Utah, when they're talking about how they're going to break the patriarchy, but many of them are clearly still in patriarchal marriages. And the main definition they have for feminism or for breaking the patriarchy is by being the primary providers. And I think part of that comes back to what you're saying about the Family Proclamation, that it literally says men should be the ones to provide and preside and protect. And so they're kind of bumping up against that. But I think for an outsider, I would imagine it's like, okay, well, women working, we've established this decade ago. This is not like a new way to kind of like,
it's not radical.
It's not exactly. Yeah. But the way that they're framing it is like, wow, we're the breadwinners, and that's the main way that we're kind of like going to be fighting this patriarchal system. And that is also the main language that they have for feeling like emasculated. Like you were saying, that seems like that element, which I think for a lot of people, like, well, yeah, a woman can work. That's totally fine. That's not weird. Still seems to be such a sticking point. And I don't think it's inherently because these people are immature or these people are silly reality TV stars, but that they have this proclamation framed on their wall and they read it all the time, and it's still in practice in 2025.
Yeah, I also am remembering a point in the season a bit later as this is all unfolding where Jessi says that Jordan said she couldn't do anything right around the house when it came to laundry and taking care of the kids. Like, she rattles off some like traditional homemaking tasks, and that just adds so much to discuss there. But you look at Jordan and you think his wife is providing a wonderful income for his family, and he has the opportunity to step in so many other ways to help support the family dynamic and find purpose and find meaning. And it seems like he doesn't. It seems like Jessi is still the one doing all of those things. And yeah, I guess just back to the point about a patriarchal setup and him feeling emasculated is maybe particularly ironic, because it feels like he's kind of floating in this meaninglessness because he doesn't have work, when in reality, there's so many ways he could find meaning in his life beyond working for a paycheck that I think would probably help him form a greater sense of self and identity and even masculinity. And who's to say how much he is or isn't doing that? But I do think we had a pretty good clue when Jessi said, like, he's critiquing the way I take care of the home. It doesn't sound like he's really helping out there either.
That's a really good point, that he has the ability to search for meaning now, and he doesn't have to really worry about it making a paycheck. Like, how many men are frustrated in corporate jobs or like under the patriarchy because they're having to, you know, put how much they're earning first. And he now has this opportunity to, in some ways, do whatever he wants. But it just doesn't seem to be, maybe his brain's not set up to like think about it like that.
The wiring runs deep, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so let's transition a little bit to Mayci and Mikayla. We have just a quick clip, just I don't know how long we want to talk about it for. But Jessi confides in Mayci and Mikayla, and she's very open, like we've established. This is what happened. I kissed him. They are surprised. They're trying to decide whether or not they believe her. They want to believe her, but they're also skeptical, which is interesting. And then they make a joke because Jessi said that when they kissed, they'd been drinking. I think she said she had 5 espresso martinis. You know, I understand a good espresso martini. And so then this next clip is kind of their like lighthearted Mormon response to this.
All right, we'll roll a clip.
Like, I started to keep replaying Jessi telling us she had an affair over and over my head. But then that's why I'm in the church. They don't like you to drink because things like these happen. You have alcohol. She shouldn't love the church. I'm just kidding.
That's for real.
A big old sigh. Now, just to be clear, like, I don't think Taylor's much of a Mormon these days. And I don't think Layla's much of a Mormon these days. Like, first of all, are any of them very much Mormon these days? But also, is Jessi the only ex-Mormon? Really?
Mayci has a temple recommend.
Who?
Mayci,
Mayci? Okay.
the woman who
who just said that. Yeah.
Okay.
So they talk about that in the season. She has a full temple recommend. I think besides Mayci, she's like for sure the most Mormon on the spectrum. I mean, I still think a lot of them identify as Mormon, but I think Mayci is likely the only temple recommend holding.
Maybe
one.
Whitney?
Maybe Whitney.
Yeah, it feels like they're all holding on to it to certain degrees, which we see a lot. Like, a lot of people will be inactive for years, but they wouldn't declare themselves ex-Mormon.
Yeah.
It seems like Jessi's the only one that's just like fully removing herself entirely from the label.
Okay.
As far as not drinking, in context of this clip, Mayci wouldn't drink, but I feel like the rest of the cast members drink. So it is, yeah. I mean, I think her making that comment. I also just finished Mayci's book recently because she has a memoir. And I will say, maybe a little bit in her defense, she has a really, I mean, I found her story really compelling, but she has a history of drinking, partying as a college student that got her in compromising situations. So, I mean, obviously we can talk about kind of where this comment is coming from, but I do think from her perspective, I can see a little bit why she's like, you know, I've had too much to drink before and found myself in situations that I wish I wasn't in, that I probably wouldn't have been in without alcohol. So I think that's also a part of where she's coming from here.
Well, and I think part of that too is it's like the abstinence only sex ed, and then you get pregnant the first time or the first few times you have sex. I think that as Mormons, like, we don't learn how to have a healthy relationship with alcohol very well because it's all no alcohol. And then it's really common, I think, for ex-Mormons to find themselves in compromising situations, or active Mormons who are being sneaky. And I think, you know, of course, Jessi should not have done this. And I also think, like, you have to learn how to be able to handle alcohol in appropriate ways. And I think that's something that our community doesn't do very well at. We don't know how to like learn our limits often. And so we kind of like go back into this black and white thinking of like, see, this is what happens when you have alcohol. And we're kind of clumping any association of alcohol into the worst case scenario bucket, or leaving the church into this worst case scenario bucket. We don't have like, and of course that happens. People do leave the church and they can have a terrible life. But also people can leave the church and have, you know, be healthy and happy. And I think that we just love to kind of categorize these things, even though she's saying it lightheartedly. And I kind of get the joke, and maybe it's kind of like a ha, us Mormons love to say this. But the base of that is a comment that Mormons do say in earnest all the time.
Absolutely. And I mean, another rebuttal is that plenty of Mormons have affairs sober.
Yeah.
That's not like the determining factor, obviously, but it's very easy when something like alcohol is involved to be like, oh, see, there you go. Good on us because we don't drink alcohol and are therefore sparing ourselves this kind of behavior, when that's also just not true.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also showing that, she's almost like so eager to say that. And I was like disappointed yet not surprised that she came out with the most Mormon response ever to a situation like this. Of it's exactly what I would have said when I was Mormon of, oh, it's because you left the church, this and this. When Jessi the whole time is talking about how the status of, or, the state her marriage is in is what caused this. And at no point I feel like did she blame it on drinking or alcohol, or felt like, oh, if I hadn't had so many drinks, I would have acted differently. Like, I feel like so many times she emphasized this is due to the place that me and my husband were at. And it was just funny to me when I was putting clips together, I had to include that one because it's just the most classic Mormon response from the most Mormon person on the cast. And, the responses never change, I feel like, from Mormons. It's always this.
It is the ex-Mormon trope, right? That you
Mhm.
leave the church, drink, and then have an affair. But
that's true. I didn't think about that.
But I can just think in my immediate family, for the 25 years we were all super devout. There was hidden drinking, there was hidden smoking tobacco, there was hidden affairs, and that's just in my immediate nuclear family, and over half. Let's just say that. So I do get a little bit grouchy about that trope or stereotype getting perpetuated, but also we can also have a sense of humor about it too. Really quickly, Fit Angel sent us a super chat, and I think I got objectified. She wrote, "John, the beard looks great."
John,
women,
how does it feel?
How does it feel to have
Wow.
the man be the one that gets the first comment about his appearance? Is that good? Should I be insulted or should I be?
I think we're breaking the patriarchy with that
Yeah,
one.
exactly.
You got paid, so
Anyway, thanks for the support, Fit Angel. We appreciate it. All right. Where do we go next?
Alrighty. So moving along. Oh, okay. So things are not going well with Jessi and Jordan. We're still staying just kind of on this same topic of Jessi for a minute, just kind of moving through the episode. So in episode 2, they decide they're going to do a 90-day separation, kind of see where things go. Jessi and Jordan have an audible argument. And I do think it's interesting to think about the things that Jordan is willing to say on camera. I think that's unfortunately very telling. Jessi's mom and sisters are downstairs listening, and Jordan is just being really insulting. Jessi's crying. They just have an argument, and Jessi's mom seems very surprised about the affair, but is telling Jessi that she thinks that Jessi should have left the relationship years ago. And this is where we really start to understand that this affair did not exist in a vacuum. She starts talking a lot more openly about the emotional abuse that was going on. And I will say, it seems at the beginning of the season, she seems a little bit more worried about protecting Jordan. As the season continues, she starts, kind of like opening that door a little bit, and it gets darker and darker as the episodes progress, as we see more of Jordan's behavior on camera and as we hear more stories. So this is really where we're diving in. I guess one thing that we'll say for this and just for the rest of this episode, there's a lot of dark themes in this series. So take caution if you're listening or watching. So I just wanted to hear what you guys are thinking just about that initial, once we kind of start hearing about, how this relationship is actually looking on the inside.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where a little shocking, but not very surprising, I would say. And I think, certainly I'm biased toward Jessi, probably for a lot of reasons, but I do think as soon as the context unfolded, I very quickly was like, oh, we see exactly why she did what she did. Seems like it was a cry for help. It seems like it was looking for validation that she wasn't getting at home, maybe even potentially subconsciously sabotaging her marriage because of the state that her marriage was in. It felt very reminiscent hearing Jordan speak to her on camera to how Zach spoke to Jen in previous seasons. That was kind of like the toxic relationship of previous seasons. I do think it was interesting because Jessi has really put on, speaking of that facade, she really has put on kind of, they seem really happy up until this season. And the way that they interact online together, Jordan is very involved. He's involved with her. He's involved with the men. He's very involved on the show. And so to realize, oh, this has been happening all along since they first met is just really devastating, I think, as well, because we see Jessi as this character who is, before she even came on the show, before she was even doing Mom Talk, she is a business owner of like a gigantic company. She seems to have it all together. And so to see her being treated, to have her husband be so demeaning toward her is, let me be so clear, that should never happen. But especially when we've kind of come to know Jessi for being this like boss babe that she is, it's particularly jarring because it's like, what legs does this guy even have to stand on? And yeah, it's kind of one of those things of like, oh, there's another one. And we kind of are seeing this pattern repeated that we saw in earlier seasons with a different couple.
Mm-hmm. It also kind of shows how sometimes just like slapping a label on something that has happened, like affair, can be like flattening, because it's like, okay, what is an affair? It's like you've crossed these boundaries that you have sort of agreed upon within your relationship. But it's like emotional abuse is a constant boundary cross. So when you look at it like that, it's like, I don't know. I feel like in Mormonism, obviously, the way this would get litigated is like the affair is always the worst thing. But emotional abuse is like someone crossing your boundaries for years, presumably, and like deliberately sort of wearing you down so that you become reliant on them. It's no wonder that she was like seeking external like worth building in someone else when that's like what she's sort of been primed for and isn't getting it from her husband.
I don't know if this is in that initial conversation. I believe it is, because I feel like he brings this up a lot. But Jordan also uses their children against her multiple times, where he says things like, now our son will know that you're a cheater, and what will our children think of you and think of us? And I think that that not only speaks to the level of emotional abuse and manipulation, because that's just a horrible thing to leverage against a mother. I think it also speaks to what we've been talking about with this dynamic where they do have children. And because of the Mormonism, because of the pattern of getting married young and having children young, and now Jordan is almost using that as leverage to further his emotional abuse, to further the guilt and the shame, which, yeah, I mean, if we do need to compare the two, I think absolutely Jordan's wrongs far, far outweigh Jessi's affair.
And I think part of what makes it so difficult is that when we use the word affair, like you were saying, Sam, like that feels very tangible. And I think emotional abuse, verbal abuse, some of these things can be a little bit more ambiguous, or it might be different within different relationships, or it might be harder to like pinpoint exactly what's happening, or to be able to articulate exactly if that's happening in your own relationship. And so I think Jordan is obviously creating an unhealthy dynamic for years. And then he uses the affair as leverage to explain why, to justify the behavior that he's doing. He says a couple times, you know, you're making me act this way. You deserve for me to act this way. And Jessi makes a comment at one point saying like, this is familiar. This type of fight is how things used to be. So it's very clear that this is a very, very familiar dynamic between the two of them. And Jessi says in a different podcast separately, she talks about how, as far as using their children against them, that Jordan at one point like brought the kids in and said, okay, everybody, I'm telling you right now that like mom and dad are getting a divorce, like in the middle of a fight, as a way to like, make Jessi feel horrible. And I think part of that is like weaponizing the family, which also feels, the way that it's used here also feels like it's stemming from this patriarchal system, that like we're using, oh, you're a mom. And yes, having children, that of course raises the stakes. And I think that is just a fact, that is a really important layer. But also I feel like that's being weaponized by the men over and over again, that like, I can treat you badly, but if you choose to leave, you're breaking up the family and you're a bad mom now. This feels like a comment that Zach was making, that Jordan was making, that Dakota has been making, that Taylor's family has been making, that the idea of the nuclear family being together and being perfect is more important than the mom being treated well, and that the mom being abused or the children witnessing the mother being abused is somehow going to be less harmful on the kids than a divorce or than the parents not being together.
Yeah.
And I think Zach makes a comment too, like, man, like these women, you know, they are just okay to like break up a family.
He says, I'm all for female empowerment.
Why is that?
Oh my
Yeah. But he says, ultimately, why is not everybody in this situation rooting for the family to remain together? And I think it's exactly that. I think it's particularly telling that in an affair where the woman is the one who cheated, that seems to be much more top of mind.
Mhm.
And I think that just goes to show within the patriarchal framework, well, women are in charge of the well-being of their children. And so regardless of at what sacrifice, although I completely agree, I don't think it's better for the kids to stay in a toxic or abusive relationship. But it's kind of like, well, regardless, no matter how you feel about how he's treated you, if you're a good mom, you do what's best for the kids.
Exactly. If you love your kids, if you're not selfish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is wild for him to be saying while he's weaponizing the children
Yeah.
for his
in the
own
literal
ben-
moment.
Like that just shows that
exactly.
the kids are not primary to you because you're not even cognizant of the impact that's going to have on them or how you're crossing like their emotional boundaries. Like that's not healthy for a child to be like receiving your reactivity like that in an argument.
Absolutely.
As a child of divorce and as someone who's experienced lots of divorce, as probably we all have in our or in our own lives per se, the comment I want to make may or may not be relevant to Jessi and Jordan, but I want to just introduce it anyway. One of the things I hate, there's two things I hate about marriage, and I love marriage. Two things I hate about marriage. Number one is it seems like it sometimes leads people to feel like they, quote, have or own the other person to the point where they don't, let's just say, try as much in the relationship as they did when they were courting. But the second thing is far more insidious, and that's that if the marriage isn't working or ends up not working out, there's so much shame and stigma around divorce that it makes both sides feel like they have to really blame the other for being the cause. Now, let me just say, yes, abuse happens. Yes, I'm sure Jordan was emotionally abusive. So I'm not in any way trying to take away from Jessi's experience or claim that there aren't sometimes one-sided divorces. And I have seen two-sided problematic marriages where they're just trying to destroy each other with hand grenades and bombs and allegations. And I just hate that. Why can't it just be, it didn't work out. So we had some years together. Maybe we had some kids, maybe we didn't, but I wish you well. Let's now go find our next journey. But I can't say that this part of the series was giving those vibes, but I wanted to just introduce that topic anyway, because it bugs me.
Well, there is a point when Jessi, because Jessi has been previously married before Jordan, and as she's like really reckoning with the fact that she might end up divorcing, it's kind of the most emotional we see her, and she says, I don't want to get divorced again. And I think that is such a unique situation to be 30 years old in a second marriage with children, still so young, and be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this all again. I thought I had already done this. And I think to your point, I mean, I don't want to psychoanalyze too much, but potentially Jessi kissing Marciano could have even been her way of being like, now this is enough reason that we can part ways. Not even needing to blame, but just having it be enough cut and dry of like, oh, there was cheating. Because then people can be like, why'd you divorce? Well, there was cheating. Because it is more cut and dry than emotional abuse.
I just saw a TikTok clip of her on a podcast today saying that she thinks that it was like a deliberate self-sabotage because she was wanting to get out.
Yeah.
And isn't it interesting that instead of just saying, hey, let's talk heart to heart, this isn't working, I'm not feeling good, you're not feeling good, we choose the hand grenade option
Yeah.
and blow up our lives, the other person's lives, our kids. Just, we'd rather blow it all up than have the difficult, direct one-on-one conversations.
Well, I think a lot of couples in traditional Mormon situations that got married that young, it's like you really don't know each other that well. I mean, Jessi even talks about this herself. Her and Jordan met and got married very quickly while she was very fresh off of her divorce. And so a lot of times I think these marriages, they lack, I mean, sometimes even just compatibility, but beyond that, there's just not that level of communication is just, and I mean, that's hard anyway. Obviously, I think all relationships are striving toward that. But I think, speaking for myself, because I did get married at 20, I'm now 30. I mean, looking back, luckily for my husband and I, we've been able to work through it. But looking back at how much growth we've had to do, especially around communication, it's just, you're set up at a disadvantage when it comes to having those types of conversations, I think, especially because marriage, the concept of marriage, I think also in Mormonism, is not what marriage actually is. I think it's if you find the right person and you love each other initially and you believe in God and stay Mormon, then you will be happy. And yeah, it's just a lot more complicated than that, but people don't want to show that because that's not how marriage is viewed.
Well, it's Spencer Kimball's any two people who are Mormon, who love God, can make it work mentality.
Yeah.
And I think part of what is also just like we keep coming up against in these relationships over and over again is really young marriages. And within Mormonism, marriages simultaneously not taken that seriously because we get married 6 months after we meet each other. And it's like, oh, if you're Mormon, awesome. You're 18, awesome. You love each other for a minute, like totally fine. Have kids right away. And so it's simultaneously so cavalier. And it's marriage for time and all eternity. It's the most important thing in the entire world. It's extremely difficult to get a sealing canceled once you've been sealed. And so I think like we're just hitting this problem over and over again of these really casual marriages. And also, I mean, I think divorce is stigmatized anyway, everywhere. But then you add the Mormon element. And even though Jessi and Jordan aren't Mormon anymore, that stigma is still there. The idea of getting divorced within Mormonism within Utah is so scandalous. It's the worst thing that can possibly happen. And I just think that they're not really well equipped to either handle marriage yet because they're young to handle, or to handle divorce because the stakes are so high.
That's the thing. It's so understandable that she, especially if they don't have good communication and he's abusive, she's not going to feel able to go to him to workshop these problems. It sounds like she probably couldn't get the buy-in from him. And it's just such a normal human thing that whatever we're repressing is going to come out in a more dysfunctional way. And so I'm almost like, who are we to really like litigate the morality of this stuff? It's just like a fact of human nature that if you're trying to, you know, like conceal a part of your own inner reality, it's going to like fight for your attention. So you will like, you know, make wilder moves and potentially pendulum swing to try and like create some movement. Like it's her saying that she feels like she kissed Marciano or whatever as a way to self-sabotage. It's like, yes, sure. But it's like her psyche attempting to like find wholeness in a way. Like it's a dysfunctional way to go about it. But like, yeah, as much as it's self-sabotage, it's also this like pursuit of healing in a weird way.
Totally. Brooklyn, let's get you in here.
Yeah, I kind of feel like another layer on top of all the things you guys are saying is that I personally think it is a thing for women to feel like they stay in something much longer than they probably should because we have this tendency to feel like I can make it better. I can keep fighting for it. You know, it's the classic trope of like, I can fix him. It's okay. You know, we just, I think, work really hard to keep fighting for something. And I think end up staying in far longer past everything. It's past something, a healthy place in the marriage. And then I think that just creates so much buildup. And then they're just in such a difficult place that then something like this happens. And I don't know, so, something along those lines of just, I think a lot of this happens when women don't know when to leave.
And I would just also add an element of Mormon doctrine and theology that more and more I'm feeling like is billed or sold as the greatest feature of Mormon doctrine that's actually potentially one of the most damaging and harmful. And that's this idea of eternal sealings, eternal marriage, eternal families. Because any of these stakes or pressures to stay or stigmas are all amplified by a billion when you add that you're breaking up an eternal marriage, you're breaking up an eternal family, you're violating your temple covenants, you're leaving the covenant path. Instead of just allowing people to be people and, oh, the marriage didn't work out, or, oh, we're not happy. Oh, let's find you someone that you're happy with. It's you gotta stay married, not just for your entire life, but for eternity, or you're violating your covenants with God. It's just too much pressure.
Or you'll never see your children again.
Yeah, right?
Like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
the worst possible punishment.
Yeah.
I wonder too about the ex-Mormon side of things with Jessi and Jordan, which she doesn't speak to explicitly, but I do feel like there's almost an opposite pressure of, okay, now I've left the church and now I can't be one of those people who leaves the church and gets divorced, who cheats and then gets divorced, because that's what people think of ex-Mormons. I almost feel like sometimes I've felt this type of pressure where it's like, when I left the church, someone in my family sent me an email and they were like, I've seen what this does to marriages, to families, and I've seen families fall apart, was what this person said. And that's kind of the threat of, if you step away from Mormonism and these eternal covenants and sealings, then inevitably your family will fall apart. So there also could potentially be almost the opposite pressure of, now that we're publicly outside of Mormonism, we maybe need to hold on even tighter just to prove people wrong, essentially.
That's wild to receive in an email.
Yeah, you're telling me.
Wow.
I did tell this person, to be fair. They sought me out and I said, no, thank you. So they chose an email,
Like,
which ended up being easier. Yeah, but I was like, okay, thinly veiled threat. But I mean, I think it does create pressure, right? It's like, oh man, if theoretically down the line, my husband and I had something happen where we decided to separate, I know for a fact people in my life would absolutely, similar to what we were talking about with alcohol, they'd be like, oh, of course, because they left the church. And, it's unfair and not true, but I still think it creates pressure for ex-Mormons.
And I hate the idea of a man or a woman staying in an abusive marriage because of the doctrine of eternal families and eternal marriage, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So let's move on. Oh, okay. Now Jessi visits Natasha. She gets another cameo, which is fantastic. So
this is our own Natasha Helfer, who has been on Mormon Stories a lot. She's a therapist who works down the hall here in this very facility, but also was excommunicated for teaching ethical mental and sexual health principles. But we love Natasha. So sorry, I had to show.
No, you're great. Yeah. So I think these couple of clips kind of show some of the big moments that Jessi has with Natasha that I think also gives us a little bit of insight into our boss babe's internal world a little bit.
All right, let's roll the video.
If I had to ask you right now, what do you like about yourself? What would you tell me?
I'm really giving. I would let anyone move in with me, get the shirt off my back. Like, I know that I have that quality and I like that about myself, but I also hate it because I feel like it gets me walked all over. Mm-hmm. And I've definitely had lack of boundaries in relationships because of it.
What do you like about yourself physically?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That it was one of the saddest moments of the series to me.
There was just the audible gasp, 3 audible gasps.
Yeah.
In the studio.
I mean, you just feel it. I think any woman feels it. And I think, there's been a lot of talk about these women, and a lot of them have plastic surgery and have work done. And, that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But I think that one question and answer just goes to show the amount of honestly just like self-hatred women are taught inside of Mormonism and outside of Mormonism. But as we've, consistently been saying, I certainly don't think the Mormon factor is helpful, nor the Utah factor, as we've been discussing with appearance. And these women now being on TV where they're watching themselves, and, so much of the gig is how they look. And I can just only imagine the toll that takes on their self-esteem.
Yeah, it almost felt especially heartbreaking to hear, because she is a woman who's like, she puts a lot of time and effort and money and into the way she looks. Obviously her career is the hair extension business. Like, her life is so focused on the way she looks, and yet it doesn't seem to be yielding. Like, there are some women who are like, I don't like anything about the way I look, but it's not really a huge focus in their lives. Maybe, they're just in a different line of work, or it's just not a big deal to them. But it's hard coming from someone where it is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it also just feels like women, we can never really win as far as appearance goes. And I think that's something that cuts so deep, especially in Utah, as we've said, that is so heavily focused on appearance, that I think it's easy, to view influencers who have this perfect life, or people who are spending a lot of money on cosmetic procedures as the pinnacle of beauty. And that if you have that, like traditional standard of beauty, if you meet that traditional standard of beauty, then finally you'll be happy. You'll finally have self-worth. And I think it is a peek behind the curtain that, for at least in her case, even though she is a very beautiful woman and has a lot of success based on how she's looking, that she still isn't feeling fulfilled by it or feeling good by it is just something that we can never, it's an unattainable goal, and it's something that's just going to be continually wiping people out. And it's just sad to see that perpetuating decade after decade after decade. And it seems like that narrative really isn't changing.
I think this also gives insight into the affair, particularly once we kind of see her and Marciano on screen. Marciano is very complimentary. He talks about how beautiful she is, and you can see why she would be vulnerable to that when she has such low self-esteem, particularly around her appearance.
Let's move on to the next
Real quick,
clip.
can I'm sorry. Really quickly, can y'all help the male audience? Like, if I'm trying to connect myself, like, there are features that I don't like about myself. Like, my teeth have been crooked, or they're yellow, or I have a big nose. But like, this idea that there's nothing about my appearance that I like is something that I don't think I've, as a man, ever felt. Is that, like, can y'all all relate to literally this idea of nothing? And if so, for maybe whatever comfortable you're sharing, can you talk about that? Unless it's too sensitive, I don't know.
No, I just had this is not directly an answer to your question, because I feel like there are things about my appearance that I could say that I like. I do think, as a woman, this is a small example, but there was a video. I talk online, and oftentimes, I'm sure everyone here has had this experience, but like, Mormon podcasters will like clip my audio or whatever and then respond to it, or like use it in some type of way. And someone did that maybe a month and a half ago, and I was reading the comments, which I shouldn't do, but someone was talking about, I have these moles on my neck, and someone commented and was like, oh, I just can't, something about me having moles on my neck. And I think that's a good example of, that's just not even something I've ever even cared about. I actually think it's cute. It's just part of me. And to have even little tiny things about how you look called out when it's, number one, completely irrelevant, has nothing to do with who I am or what I'm saying. And I do think that is so much more common for women to feel like, here I am sharing like thoughts and opinions and my intellect, and someone's like, oh, her moles are whatever. And I mean, that kind of thing happens all the time. Things I would never even think about my own appearance, people will publicly comment on because they don't like what I'm saying about Mormonism. So a Mormon man will come and say, well, you are ugly, essentially. And I'm sure these women, I mean, I can't even imagine the level of that they're receiving. I'm sure every single thing about her face that she probably has loved. She's had someone online say her nose is this, her eyes are that, her eyebrows are this, her hair color's bad. And, you know, I just can't even imagine with that amount of people pointing those things out that it's probably been stolen from her, the things about herself that she probably used to love. And I think in huge part because of online culture.
Okay.
And I wonder if sometimes as a woman, it almost is a weird, it's almost like your brain trying to protect you by being like, don't get too comfortable, like don't get too, especially because she's in a situation where, you know, she's done something that she feels ashamed about. I feel like when you're in that really deep shame spiral, it's very easy to be like, I just shouldn't. Like she said also in that scene, she didn't even feel like she deserved to drink water. So I think it's also probably, the situation probably doesn't help. Like I would imagine there are times in life where she does like things about the way she looks, but she probably in that moment doesn't really feel like she's allowed to.
Yeah, it's almost like a protective response in some ways too, of like, well, what if I say I like my hair and then, you know, so-and-so doesn't, so I may as well just, no, I don't like anything about myself.
Yeah, you know,
either.
everyone on the internet will destroy her, whatever she would have said.
Yeah, it's true.
I would hate to think that Mormon and or U.S. culture makes women feel like there's nothing beautiful about them.
Well, it does.
It does.
I mean, yeah. You've always got to be, I mean, I think something that most women can relate to that men usually can't in the same way is just as a woman, you feel like you should always be in some way striving to improve your appearance. Or like there's always a tweak you can make, or you're always kind of like thinking about it. Whereas with men, I mean, especially if you take like an attractive man who gets feedback that he's attractive from the world, he's generally not moving through the world thinking, what else should I be doing? He's just like enjoying that, even if he has insecure days. But as a woman, it's like, even if you're considered conventionally attractive, it's like, how can I preserve it as I age? How can I maybe go a step beyond? Like, it's never good enough.
And it's just not as much currency for men.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say these men on the show get pretty picked apart for how they look. Like there's all these comparisons of they look like the kid from Incredibles or whatever. And I'm not saying that's justified, nor do I think that they don't deserve to have some type of feeling about that. They do, but it's just so much less their social currency. So it hurts less because these women, so much of their social currency is how they look in a way that it's just simply not for the men.
I'm super bummed. Brooklyn.
Yeah, no, it just also made me super sad to hear how like quickly she was prepared to say absolutely nothing. It's also something that, you know, because when I'm watching reality TV, which I love, I also kind of love to read into how being on camera is affecting how someone's acting in the moment. And I almost wondered, like what you guys were saying about how if she said anything, someone online would have then commented, you know, if she said, oh, I like my nose, and that was the one thing she really liked, someone would have gone on and said, oh, she shouldn't. And then there's the one thing that she liked broken down even more. And I just hope that, you know, if that camera wasn't there, that you have to believe there's something she'd like by herself. But yeah, it made me really sad. And I was shocked that even just as a woman who runs a hair business, she didn't do some self-advertising and say, I love my hair. I think I'm amazing at hair, you know, and I do a great job. I almost feel like that was a missed advertising moment, but but
like my extensions in such and such color.
Yeah.
X amount of money.
So yeah, it definitely made me really sad, especially because I feel like as women who always feel self-conscious about something, and you know, for Mormon women, it's really important how you're perceived by men, because I feel like that was so much what I was taught about my value. And I feel like I would always have to have, you know, one thing in your back of my mind of like, oh, I don't like this and this and this, but I like this thing and I'm going to hang on to that. So it was super sad to hear that she didn't have that one thing ready to go.
Yeah, and I think that internet culture, being an influencer, being on TV is absolutely exacerbating all of the issues and self image issues that she would be having, anyone would be having. But I also do think like it's something that a lot of women have experienced, that hopefully, you know, people can find one thing, but there have definitely been seasons in my life where I can't find a single thing or think of a single thing that I like about myself physically. And there've been seasons where I've thought of something that I like, but you know, there's always going to be something that I don't like. And I think that just kind of ebbs and flows with time and age. But I think that is like, unfortunately, a pretty universal experience.
Okay.
Next clip.
Yeah.
Yes.
Move on.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Oh, sorry.
You get
I
the
actually-
beard compliment. And I'm just kidding.
I actually had a friend listener offer to give me eye surgery. I have a droopy eyelid here.
Mm.
And he's like, John, let me pay to fix your droopy eyelids. So
You're like, wait, I didn't
even
know
I
I had
get
a
it.
droopy eyelid.
Even
You're
I
like,
get
wait
it.
a second.
I'm like, is it that bad? Anyway. All right. Next clip. What's
This
the
one's
setup
also
for this here?
Natasha.
Okay.
In the same therapy
Yes.
How are
session.
you feeling about the infidelity? Like, are you in a space of self-grace, self-shame?
The first few days were really hard for me because I felt like I wasn't even deserving to drink water if I was thirsty. Like I really struggled like the first 2 days just being like, I don't deserve anything. Like I made this huge mistake and like I just don't deserve anything.
I mean, Sam mentioned that a moment ago, but I do just feel like we just see that shame so much in Jessi's experience, and it's clear that like she really, really regrets what happened and has no self-grace at all, and it's just hard to watch.
I think that's part of why, I mean, with her affair happening, yes, again, we can say a million times, like, not, infidelity is not good, frowned upon, as Jessi would say. And also, I mean, she's heaped enough guilt and shame on herself. And I think she understands, she's thought about it, she's working to amend it. And I also think that's just a good example of, these mistakes. Taylor actually makes a comment a bit later where she says something about how essentially Mormonism exacerbates that shame and they want you to feel shame. And I think that especially with sex stuff, that shame is just, I mean, we know how shameful she already feels about it in a way that I think a man absolutely wouldn't because of conditioning. So I think that also makes her sympathetic in this way of like, no one needs to pile on what she's already experiencing herself. Yeah.
So I just asked ChatGPT what percentage of people are involved in some sort of marital infidelity during their lifetime, and I don't have my glasses on to see what the result is. But I've heard it's something
but it's a lot.
Isn't it like a third or something?
I'm not sure.
So
What does chat say? I'm curious now. Let's get those glasses on.
It says it's difficult, but it says about 20% of men and 13% of women.
Wow.
In at least, or 20 to 25% of marriages. So, I mean, that's a third of all people, if I'm reading this right, a third of all people in marriages
Are
in the
cheated
United
on
States
or cheat.
are unfaithful.
Oh.
I think. And like, so never would I want to like try to downplay the importance of fidelity. I think we're all in agreement that fidelity is good, very good and very important. And if the stat is so high, does that leave room for, just like we talked about destigmatizing divorce? Should infidelity be somewhat destigmatized, or is that too much of a hot take kind of question?
Well, we definitely need to bring more curiosity to it. Like, I think it's just like with so many social problems where we think if we just slap a strong enough shame label on it, that will make the problem go away. But infidelity is one of the worst things you can do kind of universally across the board in our society, regardless of religion, not religion. So clearly the shame thing isn't working. And to me, I feel like, I mean, Jessi and Jordan are a good example of a couple that entered into these theoretically eternally binding co-commitments, then realized that like the entire sort of psychological foundation of their lives was not true and left the church. Of course, that's going to make them vulnerable to infidelity. Like, so many people enter into marriages, these like lifelong commitments under certain false premises. Like, I would say a lot. And I think there's marriages that have managed to not have infidelity. It's like a lot of the time, even those marriages, they went in under some kind of false pretense, but they were able to sort of work with it and evolve together over the years in a way that, that didn't happen. I also think there probably are people that don't cheat when they maybe do like lust in their hearts because of the shame. So it's clearly something we need to understand better. I feel like Esther Perel has done a lot of really amazing work around infidelity. And yeah, I think shame is generally, it just shuts down curiosity. So we do need to unshame it or destigmatize it.
I also
you want to
think
say that.
In the context of committed relationships and particularly marriages, I think that communication, when there is, how do I want to word this? I feel like, to me, when things escalate to an affair, it's because there's a lack of communication and safety. And what I would wish for marriages even is that within marriages, people could feel more open to even say something like, hey, I have a coworker and I am feeling this type of way. And, and they could talk about it and kind of, to me, the thing about infidelity that is so harmful is the betrayal. And I've seen that in my own life, people who have been cheated on, and just like the kind of lifelong effects of that lack of that breaking of trust. But at the same time, I think have sympathy for especially people in Mormon frameworks who end up cheating, because I see the psychological factors behind that of missing self-exploration, sexual exploration, romantic exploration. And I think what I would wish is that it was even destigmatized within a relationship where things like that could be more openly discussed, if that makes sense. And I think taking it out of hiding, then, decisions can be made without keeping things secret.
Have you guys seen the movie Baby Girl?
Yes.
With John?
With Nicole Kidman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I didn't see it.
Fantastic movie.
Yeah,
Loved
really
it.
good. Yeah, with this stuff too. I also love Esther Perel. I was going to mention her as well.
One of my kids said something the other day really interesting, and maybe it's an obvious thought, but he basically said, anytime you make something forbidden, you're going to increase someone else's desire to do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, and then the higher the stakes, the more forbidden it is, the more terrible it is, even more they're going to want to do the thing that's forbidden, which is a weird paradox, because what that implies is that we're creating societally the behavior we don't want. And I've seen this when I've counseled, let's just say, Mormon men or women who were forbidden to look at porn and masturbate by their spouse, by the church. We've talked about many times on Mormon Stories that there have been reports that at times Utah has had the highest rates of porn usage per capita in the United States. And I've seen it where I've counseled a couple really where the let's just say the woman is feeling like the husband is literally unfaithful because he looks at porn and masturbates. So the husband just wants to hide and lie about it, but then that shame makes him feel terrible and he needs to self-soothe, so he does it more. It's this terrible spiral, right? But then when I've seen a couple get to the point where in this case, let's just say the wife says, you know what, I'm not going to police your personal behavior. I'm not going to code it as infidelity. So no big deal. What you do in the bathroom or wherever is no big deal. Weirdly, for many people I've counseled, the desire to actually masturbate or look at porn has declined significantly once they were given the permission by their spouse to do it.
Yeah.
So that would be an argument for not, again, the goal is to have less infidelity. But would this argument mean that maybe one of the best ways to have less infidelity is to make it less stigmatized?
Yeah, because I think it can create such a psychological tension and feeling of being trapped, feeling as you kind of mentioned earlier, there's this tendency in a lot of marriages to feel like you own the other person. And generally as human beings, we don't do well when we feel like we're being constrained by this concept that someone else owns us. And so then it does make us want to act out. Yeah.
And it's not, I don't think it's chosen. I don't think we choose any of these behaviors.
No. And I do think infidelity is a really good example of how the human psyche, the human spirit, our life force, whatever you want to say, it is not easily contained by like conceptual reality, the way that we like to think. Like, even if we have a really strong like conceptual worldview, sorry, I'm saying this in a weird way, but it's like relationships, like if you're in the presence of someone that you find attractive, like the truth of that moment is kind of like that energy potentially flowing between you, like that's real. Whereas this idea that like you belong to someone else, I mean, that obviously that's like an agreement you can make with a person, but that is ultimately just like a conceptual reality versus like the real moment to moment reality of like, oh, there's this erotic energy happening between us. And if your erotic energy has been so tightly constrained your whole life, it's going to fight its way out.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I think those conversations require a lot of maturity in relationships. I mean, speaking about porn or masturbation, I think even talking about an example of this, my husband, he's a cinematographer. He's often working with like gorgeous models. And if I ever find myself feeling like insecure about it, I'll say to him, like, what's your, you've been working with this person. What's your relationship like? But I have to be open enough and secure enough and mature enough that if he ever were to say like, oh, there's like a little bit of a vibe there, then we can talk about that without me like freaking out or being, you know what I mean? Because in my mind, that happens, that has happened with me. Why you have to like allow the person to have their own world. And I mean, maybe this is overly simplistic, but I do feel like having a safety in a relationship to talk about those things before they become some big hidden thing, similar to what you were saying, John, about porn and masturbation. I think even, having some sort of feelings for someone you're working with, if you come back to your partner and say, oh, yeah, there was this kind of vibe, then you can talk about it. And sometimes that can even increase closeness because there's more honesty, there's more openness with each other. But I do think, speaking to the disadvantages of like early marriage, it's like that's kind of, it takes a lot of trust to get there.
This is like advanced marriage, right? Advanced relationships, right?
And I think we have a tendency too within purity culture and US culture overall too, to like have a big defensiveness over people of the opposite sex hanging out or having opposite sex friendships once you're in a committed relationship. And I think that also kind of adds to this inherent tension that if you are married and you have a friend who is a male, or you're married and you have a friend who's a woman, like that there is automatically going to be a sexual tension there, and that is inherently an unsafe space. I think it's also kind of building up this tension and building up this forbidden issue that then, tends to actually lead to real problems. If we are like assuming, oh, this person, because I'm married to a man and I have this friend, that means that this is somehow a threat. Now I'm more likely going to look at that person in like a romantic way because that's been like, now that I'm married, I have to assume this. Whereas before, it could just be a person, or even honestly, not even in marriage, like with children, we assume that like little boys and little girls, if they're playing together, oh, you have a crush on someone, you're married to someone. I think this is just such a larger like social relationship problem of how we view people of the opposite sex in particular, and also just like a heteronormative culture anyway, where we tend to think that people of the opposite sex are inherently going to be like a sexual desire, and then we may tend to act on it because of that.
Yeah, someone in my life once said long ago, kind of offhandedly, but they were like, never be in a car with someone of the opposite sex, like just the two of you.
I was going to say that. I was taught that as a Mormon.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so that must have been where it came from. And at that time, I was in college and I had a really close group of friends. I was married, but we had like a bunch of couple friends. And there was one time where one of the friends, who was a man, was like going to give me a ride home because he happened to be on campus. And I remember being like so out of sorts about it and really guilty and feeling a lot of shame, though we just like chatted like we always do. And I got dropped off at home. And I think that's just a small example of that, which is like it creates something that does not need to be there, especially when you have these really, also to your point, Sam, like these really bounded rules of like, being in a car together, that's the thing, where it's like, that's not the thing.
It adds this charge that doesn't need to be there.
Exactly.
Your brain goes there. Yeah. I also think it's hard, especially in more like tightly wound social structures like Mormonism. Couples are not coming up with their sort of co-commitments to each other from a place of like we're tuned in to what works for us as individuals and as a couple, and like instead they're just like, they're handed this template for what your boundaries should be. So for example, I bet there's a lot of couples where both the husband and the wife would probably like it if they could be a little bit flirty with people outside their marriage. Like they don't want to sleep with anyone else, but they'd like to be able to flirt. But either time any of them does it, they maybe go to a blame space because they have kind of that guilt within themselves that they also would like to be flirty, you know, things like that, where again, it's creating a problem where it doesn't need to exist because you're just trying to like fit everyone in the exact same box. And maybe a couple that would have, Esther Perel has a really good TED talk called Monogamish, where she kind of talks about this. Like it can be really healthy for couples to, you know, who are not wanting to be polyamorous. They don't want an open relationship, but just allowing themselves to sort of like feel erotic energy with other people can be enlivening to their passion with each other. Just something to think about. But when in Mormonism, are you ever going to hear a case for like, yeah, it's fine to flirt with the opposites? Like that would be obscene.
Yeah,
under
never,
Mormon.
ever. And in the Mormon framework, even saying that, people will be like, well, then you don't really love your partner, or they don't really love you. And I think that's so reductive.
Yeah.
And unfair, especially when we're talking about these statistics of cheating. It's like, I don't think it's about how much love you have for your partner. I think it's so much more multifaceted than that. And then it's more multifaceted than these structures allow it to be. And then, you know, you just, when you're in Mormonism or other high demand religions, it's just like an increasingly tight structure. I mean, back to the genesis of all of this. The Mormons started swinging, and this is why, right? I think they had a lot of this eroticism and like sexual tension, and they had no other way to channel it. And so they ended up going to cabins and drinking and fooling around with each other. And to me, it's like, I'm surprised that doesn't happen more often when you think about these Mormon couples.
I think it does happen a lot.
Yeah, you're right. It
Like
probably happens more than,
not everyone
I know.
gets a TV show.
Yeah, true.
But I mean, as far as like the really tight social structures too, like when we're looking at the show, I also just find it so interesting, like the really distinct difference between mom talk and dad talk. And I feel like that has really come to fruition this episode. And I think that also kind of mimics larger social dynamics that exist within Mormonism and outside of it. But it feels like that's especially prominent within the church. Like, okay, women go here, men go here. We're very like gender binary. And then you also need to only hang out like with your own gender in any particular social gathering. Like my husband and I, we were talking recently, like we were just on a group date with some friends, and we found that like the women were supposed to talk to each other and the men were supposed to talk to each other. And like my husband like found our conversation more interesting and kind of joined, and like a couple of people seemed like lightly surprised, like they didn't know like what's he doing here, and you know. And I think there just kind of tends to be this like this very distinct, disparate like gender distinction, I guess, like in social circles, because like we think if we're going to cross it all, there is inherently going to be some erotic energy, but that's not necessarily going to be the case.
And it typically just ends up objectifying women, I feel like.
Totally.
Because women generally know that they can like talk to a man in a social situation and it doesn't mean it's anything. But I hate when I'm at like a certain type of event or party and it's very clear that if you as a woman just, you know, start chatting to a man who's has a wife or whatever, that's kind of not, it's like, well, then you're just, all you're saying is that like you can only see me as a sexual object.
Exactly.
Yeah, not as someone to chat to.
And that you're competition with the other women.
Yeah. I was just thinking about something I noticed. This is a small thing, but I feel like it came out in this season as well, also in last season, is Mayci and Mikayla, it seems. Mayci's the one who's like more Mormon. They constantly bring up that Taylor and Miranda have been in sexual situations together because of the swinging. And there's even a moment in this season where they're talking about if they wear garments or not. And Taylor's like, they make a joke of like, well, you've only seen her when she's naked, essentially. Like you never saw her in garments. And that feels like an extension of that as well, which is like this inability to, like they're still so caught up on like, oh, you've kissed each other.
We're still
so what does
reducing
that
the
mean?
relationship.
Yes, exactly. As opposed to like, this is all really quite fluid and ever changing. It seems like the Mormon mind can't really grasp that and gets really stuck on that of like, these two women have kissed each other. What does that mean? You know?
And have you noticed that all of the Mormon wives constantly make like gay jokes to each other? Like they're always kind of like sexualizing each other, which I have no issue with, but it's just interesting. It's like, even though they're supposed to kind of contain their erotic energy to their husbands, it's coming out with their girlfriends in this interesting way.
I'll say I was really glad. So my daughter, one of my kids is working in LA, and Alyssa, it was super fun that your husband was traveling in LA, and
they got dinner.
They got dinner, and my daughter was just like the Mormon part of my brain was like, this is so weird. I'm having dinner with someone else's husband, but then she's just like, oh, wait a minute, it was just a fun dinner.
Yeah.
So we're figuring it out, right?
Slowly but surely. Yeah.
That's good. All right. So yeah, what happens next?
Okay. So as far as timeline goes, we have a few more slides on Jessi if we want to keep talking about Jessi, or we can move on to our next topic of just like the relationship to Mormonism.
Yeah, let's finish up.
What do we think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's finish up.
Okay. Let's see.
So they take a road trip. Eminem.
Yes, that's where we are. All right, Eminem, take a road trip. They are back to being their truth tellers, trying to really determine the truth on whether Marciano and Jessi had sex. So they do a little bit of buddy comedy here on their way down, and it's very charming. But I do think it is, really just interesting, this dynamic that we have of this like intensity to try to find the capital T truth. And again, some of this could be production, like go on a road trip to Beaver. But I do think like the larger story is really interesting there about this like intensity of the semantics that we've talked about a minute ago. So they go to Beaver. Marciano admits that he'd lied about having sex with Jessi, and they're really relieved about that. Do you want to say anything about the Mayci and Mikayla on their way with the Marciano?
The
stuff?
only thought I had about this is I'm just remembering a moment when Jessi is talking about how she cheated, and she says, this is Taylor's role. Mm-hmm. And she kind of makes this point of like, how am I here? And I was just thinking about that in relation to Mayci and Mikayla, who are very much playing this like, I mean, we get more into some of Mikayla's internal world later in the season, but they kind of play these like stable characters. I do believe Mikayla is openly not Mormon anymore, but Mayci being kind of the most Mormon, and they kind of act like these mothers of like, okay, we're going to go solve this. We're going to go figure this out. And it feels almost like a setting apart. Like, this is not what we do.
Totally.
We solve this problem. And I'm just thinking about that in relation to maintaining the perfection, maintaining the, this is my marriage would never be in this situation. So here I am trying to help save someone else's marriage. And, not saying I wish anything like this upon them necessarily. I'm just saying it's interesting to see how the ebb and flow of those characters, and how ultimately I think this type of thing can and does happen to all sorts of people. And it's sometimes difficult to see that, and much easier to be like, well, I would never, but here I am like coming to save the day and figure out what happened.
And the optics of that are particularly interesting because they are both pregnant, which is like an irony, but we have like two pregnant women who both have like 3 to 4 kids who are like also only 25. Well, Mikayla's 25. I don't know how old Mayci is, a couple of years older, but yeah, taking on this like maternal role, this like, yeah, let's fix this. Let's put this to bed while they're still so young is also just like a really interesting dynamic. All right. So from there, he admits, he said, okay, I kissed Jessi. I stayed over in her room while they were drunk. But then he did lie about them having sex. So
what a jerk.
I know.
Yeah.
Why would you lie about that?
Screen time. Dude, he got 5 episodes out of it. So. Yeah, really horrible. And so then all the women, they go to St. George for an event, and Jessi decides to.
Wait, isn't it appropriate that the woman's carrying all the shame for the whatever infidelity there was.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How much screen time was given to Marciano wallowing in shame?
Not at all.
He doesn't
He
feel
wasn't
any shame. I
fast.
can tell you that much.
Genuinely, if it was the genders were reversed, it would be heinous.
Yeah.
The level of especially because Marciano knew that Jessi was married. It wasn't like a Jenna situation in the other season where she was fine because she didn't know. He knew.
She would be a homewrecker.
Yeah.
And Jenna even is kind of pitched that way a little bit.
Yeah.
And she didn't
And
know.
she did nothing. Yeah.
Well, because if a woman cheats, it's like, well, she made the decision to do that. Where if a man cheats, it's like, well, there was this gorgeous
Of course
woman
he's
in his
gonna-
bed.
yeah.
What's he
I
going to
had
do?
my needs.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Brooklyn.
Yeah, I just totally agree that, the show's literally called Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. There's not even any plausible deniability here that he knows she's a married woman. And I just completely agree with the double standards going on throughout this entire show, that it's just kind of like, we're all going to laugh and joke and take a silly lie detector test with him, where I just wish I could see it in roles reversed and he'd be called, if it was a woman, would be called homewrecker, probably shamed all over the internet, maybe lose their job. I just couldn't really get over that double standard for sure.
I've definitely seen that. Just the classical BYU football player has sex with a female BYU student. Somehow inexplicably, the female BYU student gets expelled, but the BYU football player stays on and plays. Or the Mormon man has an affair. Somehow she gets excommunicated and he doesn't. Like it almost seems like there's no way that's real, but I think it's real.
Yeah.
It's just this world. Sometimes I can't.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So from here, let's dive into our lie detector test. So
Gotta have it.
yeah. So Jessi meets with Marciano in St. George, and decides to go to dinner with him. They talk about it. Everyone is. I think we can maybe talk both about the dinner, about their meetup, about the lie detector test, all of that. But basically, they have dinner. Marciano is very flirtatious with Jessi. He's complimenting her. He brings her flowers. It's Jessi, Mikayla, and Mayci, and Taylor, who are all in St. George at the same time. Maybe someone else that I can't remember. They do the lie detector test to prove their innocence. The lie detector test, as valuable or invaluable as lie detectors are, basically comes back that they didn't have sex. They kind of like build this up as if it's going to be a storyline because something came back inconclusive, but then they never address it again. So apparently it's not a storyline. So I guess we'll just get past that little narrative blip. And then but the real drama is then they go to dinner with Marciano when they read the results. And Jordan is really upset about this. So they went to dinner together. And this sort of seems like a bit of a back and forth among the women on whether or not it was appropriate for Jessi to go to dinner with Marciano and the other women. They all went to dinner together. Taylor is really thinking it was a very bad idea for Jessi and Marciano to go to dinner together. Mayci and Mikayla are a little bit more jokey with Marciano. This becomes a tension more later when Jordan finds out. And also all of the men are very, very upset that their women didn't stop her. So let's chat about any of that.
I didn't think the dinner was a big deal. I don't know if that's just I mean, I think in a reality TV world, it's just like, of course they needed him there to read the results. They probably said, bring him to dinner. And Jessi was like, okay, like that to me is not like the line in the sand that it seemed to be amongst everyone, particularly because they weren't alone. Everyone else was there. I mean, obviously in, breaking the fourth wall, it's like Marciano is also a coworker at this point. Like he's there in Utah to film. He probably needs to eat dinner. I don't know. To me, that was an interesting thing for Jordan to like really dig into, and also for it to be like such a big deal amongst the women. I don't know. I didn't find it that big of a deal personally.
Especially as they were separated. I'm like, that is like the function of a separation, is to just experience yourself as separate people for a while. But so I do agree that if the genders were reversed, the women would have an issue with it. I do think that's true. But I also think it speaks to the fact that Jessi wasn't remotely worried that she was going to do anything wrong with Marciano. Like she was trying to get redemption, like there was no risk that anything was going to happen.
Yeah. I also think that brought up an interesting dynamic of the group dynamic, because then Jordan kind of used that as like, that's when we got the comment from Zach about Mom Talk needs to be working to save Jessi and Jordan's marriage. And how could they let Marciano come to dinner with them? And I appreciated how the rest of the women handled it, because they're like, I'm not Jessi's handler. Like, she invited him. What am I going to do? And yeah, maybe just speaks to also like group enmeshment and this need for like policing amongst everyone's all up in everybody else's business, when in reality it's like Jessi invited him. And I respect the women for being like, it wasn't their job. Even Taylor, she said how she felt about it, but I don't think it was anyone's job to kick him out.
But it is also a very Mormon thing to think we need to tattle on each other, BYU honor code, you know, this kind of like baked in idea that if there's a problem, like we need to tell someone. I remember when I was at BYU, my roommates, we were trying to decide if like it was our duty to call the honor code office because our roommate had incense in her room. And we were like, technically, like, I know we didn't, luckily, but I do think like that pressure is so heavy. And so I think that's kind of like where some of that is stemming from. And I can understand why there's like going to be a thorn in their side for Marciano in particular. I understand that he's not a neutral character, that he's also being flirty. I can see how there's going to be some sensitivity there. I don't think there is going to be any real threat of an actual relationship or further cheating happening, but I can see how it's like, you know, it's like when your partner maybe like is friends with someone that you don't like you don't like that they're hanging out together or talking to each other. But I don't think it's this as scandalous as they're making it sound. So I can kind of see like why it would be a little bit obnoxious or annoying, but I definitely don't think that it's this huge
you're right.
issue.
Not the best look maybe, but also not like, the crux of the issue either. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that it just didn't seem like that big of a deal to me. And I think it almost spoke to how almost casual the whole situation was to begin with. And I never felt like it was that huge or, you know, super salacious or scandalous of a, you know, not great to be kissing someone outside your marriage. But I just felt like the fact they could so casually go to dinner and there wasn't some like big heartbreak there from this emotional affair where we were so connected. And then, you know, he lied about me and it fell off. And like, I felt like if there was all of these serious feelings there, wouldn't have been able to just so casually go to dinner. And it just kind of reiterated to me that the whole thing just doesn't feel like that big of a deal to begin with in my eyes. I don't know, I could be totally off, but
really quickly, a couple comments I'll share. A Reddish 0823 says, great show, such smart, lovely women. I totally agree. Thanks for the super chat, A Reddish. I hate snarky comments, and I'm going to call one out. Bacon Cruiser writes, ugh, remember when Mormon Stories was Michael Coe and Dr. Robert Rittner, implying that this conversation isn't worth having? I hate this comment because I'm in like episode 22 of like a 35 episode series with Dr. John Turner on the life of Joseph Smith. Like we do the LDS discussion series. We just covered Nahum. Like, what the freak? Like,
let us talk about the secret lives of Mormon wives,
like,
please.
Like, media drives culture, like it or not. Like, stupid, low common denominator media has a massive impact on culture.
I don't know. I think this show has, I mean,
never heard of those guys.
Yeah, I don't know who those doctors are, but I definitely know the secret lives of Mormon wives women. I mean, if I may.
Yes,
I do.
Yeah, please.
If I may, Bacon 0802. I mean, I do think that I understand where that pushback comes from around reality TV. But I mean, to your point, Samantha, I think even 50 years from now, this will be such a turning point in the way that Mormonism is known and spoken about. I'm listening to Alex Cooper on Call Her Daddy, one of the biggest female-led podcasts in the world. And she's talking to Taylor Frankie Paul about Mormonism and what it's like to date Mormon men. That has not happened before. We're seeing Mormonism really explode in a way that I think is unprecedented. And I think that, of course, that's worth talking about. Of course, that's worth looking at. What is this show saying about Mormon dynamics? What is it showing to the outside world about, young Mormon women, I think it's well worth dissecting to the bone, as we are and as we will.
Yeah, and you can recognize the ways that reality TV is produced and the ways that that's influencing the stuff that's happening. Like, I think if you're a smart viewer, you can sort of see some of the differences between like what's production versus what's like obviously real authentic emotion that's being brought out. Whether or not the show is the thing prompting it, like it's still real human emotion, you know?
And
You go first.
And
my
another
last thing,
thing.
I was just going to say, I think it's easy to discount these women and their lives because they are young women who care about how they look and they make TikToks and they dance. And I think that that is reductive to think that they don't matter and that their stories don't matter and that their stories don't say really big things about the culture that they grew up in and that they continue to be a part of. So I think to discount them as like silly and vapid, which many people do this with influencers, people do this with reality TV stars. And again, yes, there's levels of production. I understand it's, you know, you have to take some of it with a grain of salt. But I also think that, you know, who's to say that some doctor man has a more important life or opinion to be spoken about than these women. I think these women are worth speaking about.
And if they're vapid, it's for a reason. So like, that's interesting.
Yeah,
you know? It's
exactly.
like if influencers, the things people hate about influencers, it's like, well, that's the impact of capitalism and like an insane advertising culture in the US and blah, blah, blah. There's always deeper you can go.
Yeah, Alyssa Grenfell posted a video noting that the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives has had the largest uptick in Mormon Google searches than anything else over the past 20 years. So that's
in all of Mormonism, like including Mitt Romney running for president twice.
Wow.
You know, like
this is the cultural moment that Mormons are going to be known for. And I think that it's also interesting that like the two people that Bacon Grease 02 is noting, it happens to be men and women dissecting part of a culture that is especially impactful to women is somehow seen as less valuable, is something that maybe you should think about yourself, Bacon Grease.
Wow, drag him.
Hot take. Brooklyn.
Yeah, I could not agree more with everything. I mean, I think whether we like it or not, this is a big part of what's going on in Mormon culture right now. And, you know, we got to talk about it. It's Mormon stories. This is John's job, and I love it. And I also think these shows, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, like it's showing a spotlight on a new way that people are living Mormonism that, I mean, I personally didn't understand as someone who was very Molly Mormon, very Orthodox Mormon. And I do get that there are people trying to live Mormonism in these ways now. And it's interesting for me to see it. And I think someone needs to, in an educated way, comment on the Mormonism of this all, where normal pop culture podcasts aren't able to do in the way John is. So I think it's good content for the channel, John.
And that's Dr. John Dehlin.
Well, Lane Bacon 435.
Sorry.
So Michael Coe and Robert Rittner. Michael Coe was a Yale anthropologist who commented on Book of Mormon historicity, and Robert Rittner was a University of Chicago Egyptologist that commented on Book of Abraham historicity. And while I'm here for truth claim stuff, like this is life stuff.
It's not anthropology,
but it's also life stuff.
Yeah,
this is
I
relationship
myself,
anthropology.
as an anthropologist, as a viewer of reality.
Well, it's all connected, right? I mean, we even have a moment I'm sure we'll discuss about Layla talking about her biracial identity and this scripture in the Book of Mormon about the curse of Blackness. So that goes back to the truth claim of the Book of Mormon and the historicity of the Book of Mormon. Like these are the real impacts of that happening to people. So I think to me, it's all connected. And I think to Brooklyn's point, the whole world is watching this show. I feel like it's really important as people who lived it ourselves and who understand, I mean, speaking to you, John, like the depth of these truth claims, et cetera, to be able to also provide some context. Because I will say one thing about the show, and I'm curious if they're doing this intentionally, but they don't provide a lot of Mormon context. They really don't. And I think people are fascinated by it because they're seeing these things play out without understanding all of the context behind it. And we're happy to provide context.
And this was such a deep season. I felt like all the themes were so heavy and deep for how much they were touched on or like able to be commented on. It was pretty nuts.
Yeah.
I also forwarded you guys the TikTok where Kristen Wiig is on Amy Poehler's podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Talking, I
Yeah.
mean, that's the top 5 in the top 10. Again, another podcast,
Yeah.
top 10 in the world, talking about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Yes, I just listened to another one, Las Culturistas. Jennifer Lawrence was on it, and she's talking about Heather Gay and talking about soaking. You know, it's like you kind of can't avoid it now in a way that's really
Yeah, and
crazy.
in some of these podcasts, I've been hearing people like Googling on the spot, like, what is the Mormon temple ceremony? Like trying to understand, like, what are all these references? Like, what are I was listening to a podcast of like 2 women in New York, and they were talking about like, did you hear that like the Mormon temple garments got changed? Like, I see that like all the women are really excited because they can wear tank tops now. Like, this is really becoming such a big moment, and I think it's like teaching the world not just about these women's lives, but about Mormonism overall. And they're also talking, I heard one of them mention something about like Joseph Smith's young wives, you know, like even those types of stories are really starting to permeate. And I think that's going to also really affect Mormons, current Mormons, who we've talked, you know, you've talked ad nauseum on the podcast about how Mormons aren't aware of like their actual history, but now that their history and their stories are becoming nationally and internationally known, I think it's going to be more and more difficult for active believing Mormons to not hear about Joseph Smith's 14-year-old wives and to not hear about those things. Like, I think that is also going to be a repercussion of this show, even though they're not talking about those specifics on the show itself.
I may be stretching here, but like this week, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announced that Mormon young women can now serve missions at the age of 18. And recently, we also reported that for the first time in the history of the LDS Church, but also in broader U.S. Christianity, there are more men in the pews than women on any given Sunday. That's in the LDS Church and broader. How could it not be that shows like this that discuss modesty, that discuss patriarchy, that discuss beauty standards in the treatment of women aren't impacting how young Latter-day Saints are either opting in or opting out of church membership? Is that a stretch?
No.
Not to mention, like, you see the way that their beliefs are shifting throughout the seasons. Like, we're on season 3, and Jen, who starting off in season 1 was extremely devout, is becoming less so. She still identifies as a member, but we see a conversation later, which we weren't going to talk about this time, but whatever, where she talks about how she's, you know, has some issues with some elements of the church, and they talk really openly at one point in the season as well about like Utah's treatment of queer people, and about like they're starting to get really specific about problems within Utah and problems within Mormon culture. And I think that we can see not only the narrative of, you know, Mormonism at large being discussed, but each of these women's beginning to have faith crises as we're coming along, which almost feels inevitable as they're starting to gather more fame, which also means gathering more information, which means being around a wider net of people that are outside of Mormon culture and outside of Mormonism. That seems like the more this is growing, the more it's just getting bigger and bigger. And it seems like this is probably why the church is so worried about it. Is it snowballing for both members on the show and people outside of the show, that there's the more awareness there is about Mormonism, the more the secrets are coming out about Mormonism, the secret lives, perhaps. And it's not a good look.
Did y'all see the TikTok put out by the LDS faithful YouTube apologists like Jasmine Rappleye and Cardin Ellis and Jacob Hansen? They do the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives circle dance.
Oh, I did see that.
Where they each do a little dance pose.
We should do that.
And it's
after
Jacob
this.
Hansen. Should we do it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Should ex-Mormons do that?
Yeah.
Who's going to choreograph?
Oh, I can. I know that dance that they did.
But it's what?
Oh, no, keep going.
I mean, Brooke, I don't know how you're going to join the dance from the UK, but
we'll stream you in.
It's definitely, you know, I even saw Jasmine asking the question of whether Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is going to be good for the LDS Church. Did you guys see that? Like, does it help paint LDS Church members to be less weird, less pioneer dressed, stodgy, awkward, puritanical?
I've wondered that.
Is that a stretch?
I've wondered that with, especially because Whitney Levitt and Jen Affleck of the cast were on Dancing with the Stars. And
another huge thing.
Yeah, which is absolutely huge. And watching them on that show, particularly where a lot of the pros on Dancing with the Stars are Mormon or Mormon adjacent. And yeah, it's a bit of probably a both and, where there is part of me that's like, ooh, don't get the wrong idea that there's not some real issues underlying this, because when you see like just these gorgeous pro dancers, happily Mormon. But I think this show, as we've discussed before, it's like, it only takes a little peek behind that door to realize it's not exactly as it seems. So yeah, maybe there's a certain element of, I don't know, to me, it almost makes it seem more bizarre that people who are living seemingly, I don't want to use the word normal, but that's the easiest word that's coming to mind, normal lives, are also holding these like very unique and to the outside world often strange beliefs. It kind of throws that even more into contrast, I think.
I was going to say also Derek and Julianne Hough were raised Mormon. I mean,
Yeah.
there's freaking Mormons everywhere.
Yeah.
Mormons are
They're popping
everywhere.
off. Yeah.
They really are.
Like, I remember I've been through several Mormon moments in the past 20 years. Like, PBS came out with this series called The Mormons, 2005, 2006-ish. That was supposed to be a huge deal. Richard Dutcher came out with his movies early on. That was supposed to be a big deal. Book of Mormon musical came out, and Big Love. And we all thought, oh, that was going to be a really big deal. And then Mitt Romney was for president. Like, there keeps happening. These Mormon moments keep happening in U.S. culture. And weirdly, this is the biggest one. So like the trend is there's going to be a bigger one.
Yeah. I'm curious from your standpoint, having tracked all of that, John, why you think this is, if you think this is the biggest one, and why you think it is compared to all those other ones.
You could argue, I think I've heard people say that, I don't want to say this about myself or us, but like I've heard people say Mormons are good looking. I've heard people say that Mormons are taught to be public speakers from a very young age. So they're very articulate, or they're missionaries. And so they are articulate. We're a performance culture where we're learning to dance and sing and play musical instruments from a very young age, even act. And then the missionary mindset of always wanting to project. Well, we're very image-based. We've already talked about that. There's a heavy beauty culture. I can't tell you many people I know who have come from California, who have come from LA, and they're like, I can't believe how appearance-based Utah Mormon culture is for women. That's LA.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think LA, does Utah out LA? Like,
just might.
So
I
these
mean,
are
with plastic surgery rates, we do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, we're the quintessential American religion. Like, and we're so corporate. Like, we're a $300 to $500 billion church at this point, and we're the most capitalistic of all. Like, corporate Mormon Jesus is the most capitalistic, wealthy, successful Christian Jesus of all Christian Jesuses. So, I mean, in so many ways, we are the quintessential American religion. Why wouldn't Mormons represent American culture? Why? Someone tell me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think of your point earlier on when you were saying nothing is uniquely Mormon. And I think Mormonism provides it's kind of like a magnified version of like a puritanical culture. It's a magnified version of patriarchy. So when you're able to see it so magnified, it provides a really great entry point to talk about not just Mormonism, but about patriarchy generally, about purity culture generally. So I think that for that reason as well, the Mormonism aside, it's a really good entry point to talking about these broader systems and cultures that really matter.
Brooklyn, we had to get you in. I saw you were unmuting for a second.
No, yeah, I was just responding because I agree, John, when you're saying, hey, could this help the church? I think it absolutely can. I just firmly believe that all publicity can be good publicity. And I frankly have been surprised that the church hasn't embraced this like Mormon moment even more, and that they do seem to be wanting to remove themselves so much from it. Because when you think about when Book of Mormon musical came out, I feel like they were kind of loving that moment and really working with it. And, they would have the signs up everywhere, Times Square, like, you saw the play, now read the book, and using that as an opportunity to like sell themselves more. And it feels like they really just want to distance themselves from this. And I get there's, a swinging element involved. But Book of Mormon musical had a lot of adult themes in it as well. And I've been surprised that they haven't embraced it more and understood that it could help the publicity of the church.
Well, yeah, that's brilliant point. And, Quentin Cook, the Mormon apostle who's in charge of missionary work, is running around the world now saying that the LDS Church is growing in every region or area in the world, not just Africa, not just Latin America, not just the Philippines, but everywhere. I think he's lying or misleading people. That's my opinion. But if it's true, then maybe Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is leading to an avalanche of U.S. conversions. So I guess to stay tuned on that one, because wouldn't that be interesting if we're going to all of a sudden double as a world religion because of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives? And now we've jumped the shark. All right, where do we go, Alyssa?
Yeah, while we're just kind of talking about maybe the women's relationship to Mormonism, let's talk about that more. I think that you can just kind of address. We have a clip, I guess. Let's jump forward to Taylor, kind of talking about her relationship to the church. I don't see the number.
I think it's
Oh, okay.
Slide
So
23.
which
Slide 23.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's called Taylor and Dakota Church.
Oh yeah, this was right at the beginning. I was like, ooh.
It's slide.
Yeah, it's that one, I think, that you were just on, John.
Okay. All right, here we go. Thanks. Sorry for our technical difficulties.
Hi, ever?
Who's that?
You ready to go to church? Yeah.
When it comes to church, I only go for the foundations of it, like love, family, service, and I like going, but I like to go when I want to go. It's like a personal thing for me, and I know not a lot of people can live in the gray, but for me, I can.
I mean, we did a show recently on Mormon Stories about these 4 types of Mormons. And of all the people in the United States who identify as LDS, a quarter don't attend at all. So that leaves, a remaining 75%. 25% identify as ultra Orthodox. And then another 25 are, another 7-ish% are like confused and don't know. But there's this large block of like 41% of people who identify as Latter-day Saints in the United States are kind of cafeteria buffet, liberal, progressive Mormons, like she just characterizes. Like, sometimes I go, sometimes I don't. What do y'all think about that?
I think it's an interesting comparison point. I don't want to jump the gun on what we learned from Mayci, but I've been thinking a lot about this because Mayci, I would say, is a progressive Mormon in the sense that she has a temple recommend. She believes in it, it seems. And yet she will say things like, I firmly disagree with their stance on LGBTQ people. She drinks coffee. Taylor, I have a less hard time with Taylor's approach because I feel like Taylor is saying, I like God, I like Jesus, this is my faith tradition, it's familiar to me, so if I want to go worship, that's where I go. She seems a little bit more almost honest with herself, I guess, in a way of just being like, yeah, I know that this is kind of unique and it might cause questions for people, but it's like, if I want to go, I go. If I don't, I don't. Whereas to me, Mayci feels like she's living in so much cognitive dissonance of like, no, I'm Mormon, I go to the temple, I do all the things, and yet I drink coffee and firmly disagree.
She's on the show.
Yeah. And I mean, she's not, you can tell she's like not wearing her garments, which is fine. I just think to me that approach is a bit more frustrating, where I feel like Taylor, there's still a big part of me that's like, girl, just give it up. Like, you don't need, there's better churches out there if you want to go worship, whatever. But I can understand where she's coming from in the sense of, yeah, this is what I'm used to. This is familiar to me. I know my word. If I feel like going, that's where I'm going to show up. Whereas someone like a Mayci, it feels more frustrating because it feels like an unwillingness to see that she is doing something that the church is so adamantly against, that she's getting a temple recommend, even though she openly drinks coffee. Like, technically speaking, that should not even be allowed to happen.
Can that happen now? Is that like a new thing, or
What?
Can you have a temple recommend and drink coffee?
I mean, nowadays, the church is not enforcing cannabis.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, once cannabis became legalized for medical use, in Utah and also in Colorado and other places, I think the church just realized this is going to be impossible to enforce. So I have heard of no church discipline around cannabis. I've heard of no church discipline around psychedelics. So weirdly, Mormons all over Utah, active, faithful, believing Mormons are doing mushrooms. They're doing they're doing ketamine. They're doing LSD.
Doing LSD.
I recently,
yes, no, for sure. Like psychedelics. Have you ever heard
in like a therapeutic setting?
Not just that. I had a bishop tell me that his stake president took him on a psychedelic journey.
Wow. How recently?
In the past 6 months.
Really? Because I was just going to say, someone I know was recommended ketamine therapy from the bishop's wife. Like in the past month.
Patrick Mason's wife. So Patrick Mason is the number one faithful LDS scholar in the world, probably, who's actively doing scholarship. His wife ran a psilocybin educational seminar. It was like ketamine / psilocybin at the Restore Conference, which is the conference for faithful Mormons in the church. So anyway, I think coffee and tea, the church is sort of unofficially telling bishops and stake presidents not to keep people out of the temple for coffee and tea. I just think across the board, the church is lowering its standards. And I was going to ask y'all, when you watch these women sort of talking about how they Mormon, on the one hand, I think we're all celebrating, but are any of you just going, and Brooklyn, I think I want to go to you first, because I think I was watching you shake your head on this. Like, do any of you watch these women and go, I don't even recognize these women as Mormon? Brooklyn, do you want to go first on that?
I definitely agree with that. It's difficult for me as someone who, like Taylor says, was not able to live in the gray, because I just think when you see Mormonism a certain way, I just always saw it as like either you're doing it all or you're doing nothing. It's such an all or nothing religion, at least how I understood it in my Orthodox Mormon brain. So it is really difficult for me to understand even how that works within their brains. But then I feel like I have such a respect for someone like Taylor who's so authentic about it. And I have to say, I feel like I'm almost jealous of how she's able to live in that gray, because I was just someone who was not. And it was like, if I wasn't all in, then I needed to be all out. And I think a lot of things almost would be easier if I was able to be in the gray. But I'm still in a place where I just can't wrap my head around how that works or how they rationalize that in their own mind. So it still confuses me to this day, as 10 years outside the church.
Yeah, I also feel just very conflicted about all of it and feel very confused. I think that anybody, of course, has the right to be able to define themselves and use whatever label they want to. And I think that if somebody wants to define themselves as Mormon, then they can define themselves as Mormon. But I definitely don't see myself or the religion that I grew up in them. And I think there's been a lot of conversation, casually saying, oh, it's a younger generation thing. It's this new thing. But I think it's more of a recent thing, because I'm a similar age to all of these women, and I grew up extremely Orthodox. And it wasn't just that my family was really Orthodox. It was, I grew up in Utah, and it was very, very strict. Anything even remotely close to a tank top at prom was completely unacceptable. There was some really serious social repercussions of anything like that. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think I definitely feel mixed about kind of how those things are coming out, similar to even just the garments, for example. In some ways, I feel jealous, kind of like how Brooklyn was saying, this thing that had so much trauma for me is now this celebrated moment for so many people in this community. And I feel really happy for them. And I also feel like an outsider. It is a really odd way to see this thing that I once knew so well and still feel like I know really well, changing underneath my feet. I sound like I'm 100 years old when I say that. It's not the same how I used to be. But yeah, I don't know. It's a really odd to not feel like I even really relate to the community that exists and how much has changed even since I left, which was in 2018. And even at that time, at least where I was, it was very Orthodox.
It was 7 years ago. Yeah. It just shows how fast Mormon culture is changing. It's changing at light speed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I just had Amy McPhee Alabest on my podcast. John, thank you for connecting us.
Breaking Down Patriarchy?
Yes, from Breaking Down Patriarchy. And she shared an analogy that was oh, that's it. And she said that when you grow up in the church, you are living in this beautiful, happy town with your family, but you start getting sick slowly over time. And then you learn that there's nuclear radiation and it's causing you to get sick. So no matter how much you love the town, you know you have to leave it in order to prevent yourself from getting more sick. And she was saying that she sees these changes, like changing the tank tops, like maybe not cracking down as much on coffee and tea, as almost a medicine to mask what is the underlying problem, which is still patriarchy in this context of what we were talking about. And I feel like that helps describe it, how I feel about it, which is, on one hand, I am happy for Taylor and I do respect her and even admire that she's like, you know, F it, I'm just going to relate to this the way that I want to. But on the other hand, I almost worry that now women will see that, they will remain in the church in this kind of halfway way. But when they're still showing up to church, they're still hearing patriarchy. They're still seeing patriarchy.
And that Maddie Packer responded to that clip with you and Amy. That's the way it's going. There's this whole resurgence now on TikTok and Instagram of faithful Mormon apologist young women who are sort of responding to you, Hayley, responding to Alyssa Grenfell, responding to you, Samantha, and others, basically clapping back and saying, stop calling us oppressed. We have power. We love this. Stop telling us that we're miserable. It's a real resurgence.
Yeah. And they say we are anti-feminist because we are saying, oh, you know, garments are anti-feminist. And they're like, well, we're choosing it. So you're the anti-feminist because you're saying that I didn't actually make this choice. But I think objectively speaking, the person who made the choice of what the garments look like is a man, are men, period. I mean, you can't argue that. So yes, it's a woman's choice if she wants to opt in or out of that, but it's not a woman who is like making those calls on that level. And I do think, yeah, I mean, obviously I do feel passionate about this because I found myself many a times like in levels of conversation with these women. And again, it's like, I think what's so emotional about it for me is I see myself in them and I see like, no, I can have it all ways. I can stay Mormon. I can do, you know, have this life that I planned on having of being a Mormon and a good Mormon. And I can be a feminist and I can be an ally to the queer community and I can drink coffee and I can wear a tank top now. And I think, again, Amy said it best, where it's like, you are still not going to be able to avoid patriarchy. You're still not going to be able to avoid purity culture. That is still the foundations of the Mormon religion, I think.
Yeah, but this really does put ex-Mormons or liberal or questioning or critical Mormons in a weird position, because we're all saying Mormon culture is a problem. Mormon culture needs to change. And so they're changing and they're making garments better. They're making the temple ceremony better. They're becoming more laxed about adultery, about premarital sex, about even being gay. Like Charlie Bird and his husband are still active and faithful as far as we know in their ward. They're making all these improvements and we're stuck between, hopefully there's part of us that are like, yay, they're making it better for women, better for gay people, better for just adolescents and young adults. And this grumpy self, like you said, Alyssa, where it's just like, I stopped the Mormonism I was raised in. I didn't get to wear that dress.
Okay, I did not use that voice.
That was not a remotely accurate reflection.
But I heard that when you were talking. But like, do we want the church to get better or not? And if they get better, then we're grumpy because we didn't have that experience. But should there be a part of us that's happy that they get to be in a healthier church? And even if, yes, a man still decided what their underwear is wearing, at least it's a less yeast infection.
Yeah, it's more comfortable. Yeah.
More comfortable, a tiny bit more sexy underwear. I promise I'm not calling you out, Hayley.
No. I think
it's a conflict.
I agree. I think it's both and. I think to me, the word I keep thinking of is insidious. To me, it's almost more insidious the more they're pretending to be something that I just don't think they are. And I don't want people to be harmed along the way, so I am happy that people are hopefully being spared harm and discomfort, etc., because people are still Mormon and will continue to be. And at the same time, I do think it also is kind of sneaky too, because it's like, now people can say, active Mormons can say, look, now 18-year-old women can go on missions. Look how progressive. And it's just not. That doesn't make the church progressive. And if it's more progressive
it makes it
now,
a little more progressive.
a tiny, tiny bit, right? So yeah, but to your point, it's true. It's like, you don't want it to be, I'm not actively rooting for the church to get more patriarchal or more unfriendly toward the LGBTQ community. But I think that is who they are at their core, I think, speaking personally. And so it almost just feels like more, it's like sneakier.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
I could just see the general authorities just going, man, those ex-Mormons, you just can't make them happy. Like, you don't change. They're mad.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
You convince them that, you start making big changes and they're grumpy. I want to come to you, Alyssa and Sam. I told Brooklyn I'd come to her first, and then Alyssa and then Sam. Go ahead,
You're fine. We may have slightly moved on at this point, but just going back to what you said about, women are saying, hey, I'm not oppressed. Don't paint me as that. I feel like that's super, in line with how Mormon women feel. I remember being in sacrament pews probably around 8 years old with my mom, and my mom whispering in my ear of like, oh, us women secretly know that we are kind of the most powerful in the church, and just kind of always being taught that since I was young. And I feel like that's just kind of a sneaky way of making us feel like it's our choice when it isn't always. And I don't know. Then after I left the church, I just kind of always look back on that feeling like, I don't think that did come from women. I think it came from having to justify where we are in that patriarchal system. And it just feels icky to me as I look back on it, that I did used to convince myself like, oh no, I am kind of more even higher above in this grand scheme than even the men. And the fact you have to convince yourself that so much, I think shows that you're not. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Totally. And they're going to say we're being condescending, Brooklyn. Like, we're not letting them describe their own experience. We're projecting onto them even our past experience. But they're saying now on TikTok and Instagram, stop telling us we're oppressed. Stop telling us we're unhappy. We're choosing this and we're happy. And it's complicated, right, Brooklyn? Yeah. Alyssa, you go, and then Sammy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an individual woman can absolutely be happy, and she can choose that for herself, and she can be empowered, and she herself may not be oppressed. And I think that's really good. And I think that can be the best choice for many women. They can find genuine joy within the church, genuine empowerment within the church. And I think that's fantastic. But I don't think that takes away from the systemic and structural patriarchal format of the church. And you said a moment ago, like, well, they're making big changes. And I think, we've had the temple language change in 2019. We took off a couple inches. These are seemingly big changes, but they're still somewhat, topical changes. And that even members themselves would admit that. They would say they're policy changes, not doctrinal changes. The problems really are with the doctrine itself, that the doctrine is inherently patriarchal. We have reading Dear Mormon Man from Amy Mikayla Best, the video was just published about it. I think we can see from there that it is layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of patriarchal man in charge elements of the church. And so we can, as empowered as an individual woman might feel and happy to wear whatever outfit she's choosing, we have to also be honest with ourselves that all of this is coming from men, that righteous dominion is still dominion. It doesn't have to be unrighteous dominion in order for it to be harmful, that we are still not making choices for ourselves. And whether we feel like we are granted little bits of permission along the way, awesome, that's great. I think that can make an individual person feel very happy and satisfied with their life, but that does not make it a healthy institution. That does not make it a progressive institution. That does not make it a pro-feminist institution.
I don't think the church wants to be pro-feminist.
Yeah.
And I think the church wants to be a patriarchy, but I do think it wants to be healthy. Sammy, what were you going to say? Or did you forget?
I had like a million things at different points. I think what Hayley said about the fact that it's patriarchal and it's purity culture kind of no matter what is sort of the main crux of it. Like the fact that a church that's sort of losing influence over its members is workshopping the best ways to continue having those members be psychologically dependent on them. Like, that's the real issue. I really don't give a shit like what kind of garments they're allowed to wear. I don't think anyone who's like ex-Mormon saying like, oh man, I had to wear worse stuff. I don't think any of us actually care, you know?
Yeah, totally.
And it is insidious the ways that they're like, I don't know, sort of performing an amount of progressivism. And I also don't think it's any more progressive allowing women to go on missions earlier now, because it's like, okay, you're recognizing that you're losing women, that you, a patriarchal church, are losing women. So you're just like, how can we retain control of their psyches? I'm like, that's not progressive. It's like, that's such a shallow.
But they don't want to be progressive. They want a strong church.
Yeah, but I want people's psyches to break free from control.
I think they want to have a strong church, which means not scaring people who are conservative or people who are progressive. Conservative
They're trying
people
to thread the needle.
Conservative people can say they're conservative. Progressive people can say they're progressive, and they've got plenty of arguments with even just taking like the women being able to go on missions at 18, you can argue a conservative argument for that they still have only a year and a half. In some ways I could see it. I saw a Tribune article arguing that like this may increase education for women, this may lower the birth rate. I didn't read the whole thing, so I could be totally misconstruing their argument, misinformation. But I could also definitely see that being something that would increase the birth rate, increase people going to staying within Mormonism, because with men and women leaving at the same time, I can also see this as more high school sweethearts getting married, because they're not going to have the time where women are going to be going to college and meeting an RM, or even maybe deciding to leave the church within that first couple years, or maybe waiting longer for their RM to come home. Everybody will be leaving at the same time, coming home roughly around the same time, marrying their high school sweetheart, having babies right away. And in some ways, I could see that increasing people staying within the church. So that is a Mormon or a more conservative Mormon argument. And then you take a more progressive Mormon argument and say, oh, well, now it's slightly more equitable. So I think, yeah, you can thread the needle on both ends in that, and the church wins regardless.
It's tricky. I'm just dying to know. It's objectively factual that the church culture is becoming less orthodox. Mm-hmm. And it's objectively factual that the church is weakening its control over its membership. We often talk about the bite model, and the bite model is defined primarily at first and foremost by behavioral control. The church is ramping down. It's turning down the volume on its behavioral control. And I'm just dying to see, number one, if it actually works out to be a healthier lived, faithful LDS experience, even if it's still a patriarchy, is it still a more positive experience than, let's just say, what y'all experienced? And ultimately, does it weaken and harm the church in the long run, or does it retain and even increase growth by chilling the F out a little bit?
Well, it's interesting because Taylor in that clip we just saw said that she goes for the foundations, which is love, family, and service. And like, those are human foundations. And the church just sort of co-opts them and is like, we're the guys that are serving you this. But I feel like the more you remove the behavior control and the rules, the more the church is sort of revealed to be what it is, which is like, well, then what's unique about it? It's like the specific bizarre behavior control is a big part of what made it unique and what gave people identity and like the feeling that they're a peculiar people, blah, blah, blah. But love, family, and service you can find anywhere. Like, those are intrinsic to us.
I do think we could talk about this all day. I do think the church does a good job of creating community. Not that it's the only place that creates community, but I think it creates community. I think it provides structure, support for parents and families that need support. Maybe not all parents and families at all socioeconomic levels depend on the church as much. But
it's able to do that through the apparatus of the patriarchy as well.
Yeah. And that's one way to organize decision-making and leadership. And I'm not a defender of the patriarchy. But I think, Samantha, I don't know if you know, we had an African from Kenya who joined the church in Africa, came to the United States, became a doctor, was angry, left the church, was upset that he was not told the truth about the priesthood ban. And yet when I asked him, are you glad that the church is quintupling down on African converts. He's like, yeah, I'm so glad these Africans are going to be brought into a church that values education, that's going to help them learn literacy and education and have a community and support. And, you know, they need to figure out the church isn't true at some point in their life. I'm glad in those younger years or in those earlier years, they're getting support that helped me become a doctor in the United States. That's what he said.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a tough one. It's like the problem of like Christian missionary work generally, where it's like you're offering these. Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially Mormonism, it's such an ethnocentric religion that like, sorry,
complicated.
I lost.
It's complicated. It's complicated.
I feel like it's worth bringing up again Jen talking to Ezra Souza. So Jen went on Dancing with the Stars, and she's talking with Ezra, who is a pro on Dancing with the Stars and is openly ex-Mormon and gay. And their conversation was so interesting because Ezra, I mean, they were friendly and polite and respectful toward each other, but Ezra was like, yeah, I came out as gay and my parents took me out of dance. They thought dance was making me gay. He was like, I mean, it was awful and traumatic. And then he said, eventually, my family came to see this for what it was, and they left the church in solidarity. And Jen responds, and she's like, yeah, you know, like I just kind of take the good and leave the bad. And I feel like that,
it's glib, right?
Yeah. And it puts it so into perspective, which is like, and not to say that I don't think Jen is still being harmed by the dynamics of the church, but it's like, okay, someone who's not gay can more easily take the good and leave the bad. Ezra could not. And I think it's really beautiful that his family in solidarity realized, well, if this is what it did to my son, then we're going to also step out on this. A note on the show is that I wish they would play that out a little bit more. Like there's these little glimpses we get of these things that we're discussing. And I'm sure that these women have thoughts and feelings on these things, but it feels like they're really towing a line. It almost feels like they maybe find it like political or something. And that's what they're trying to avoid because it is in some ways. But I was like, oh man, if we could only get a few more minutes of that conversation with Ezra and get a little bit more into like, well, how do you relate to people like Jen, Ezra, who have just been like, well, yeah, sucks for you. I don't believe in that part, but, you know, I still go on Sunday because I like it. I just feel like there's so much there and it is complicated. And I don't mean to make it more reductive than it is, but there's so many points that I feel like the show could have explored that. And they just seem, I don't know if you all felt that way, but it felt like they would get there and then just like next scene.
It's season four.
Yeah, hopefully.
Brooklyn.
I just love that point that you made, Hayley, because I think this all the time, that I think that it's such a privilege to be able to stay in that gray area of the church where some people, for example, like we're saying with LGBTQ, it's so much more difficult and harmful to mental health, so many aspects of their lives in order to stay in. And I just see this in my own life of people that I grew up with, LDS versus my family leaving LDS, where as soon as I felt like, for example, I mean, in my life, just one small element of like going through a divorce in a family, like as soon as you didn't fit into that little perfect Mormon box where it works out really well for you, just the people who do fit in that box, that I just don't see them ever having a reason to leave the church. And I just see that as like such a privilege that isn't recognized a lot of the time. And I think someone like Jen and maybe Taylor have that privilege.
Yeah, I have to always check myself because I sometimes have this tendency to want to remind ex-Mormons that there's good in the church, but I have male privilege. Like I had a great lived male experience as a Mormon. And one of the things I hate most about civilization is that like it's white men and then it's black men and then it's gay men. And we can talk all day about how sympathetic we are about those people and how glad we are for their advances. But women are always last. There's still never been a U.S. president who's a woman. And Michelle Obama said she's not running for president because America's not ready to have a woman as president. So she's not going to run. Like women, we talk about LGBT people. Oh, man, the LGBT people are really harmed in the church. But what Margie tells me is that women are really harmed in the church. And I'm just going to admit that I forget that.
Well, I think as a white woman, I do that same thing. Because, I mean, that's another thing that I feel like we got a little bit more of this season with Layla, who's a Black biracial woman. And again, that's something that I think could be much further delved into. But her experience is so different than Taylor's experience because of her ethnicity. So I feel like that, it can kind of go down the line forever. And I think it's important to remember as a white woman too.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, it's so human that we get into these modes of thinking where we feel like we have to endlessly litigate something like, is it good? Is it bad? And it's just like everything in life is going to be just a mix of all of it. I think most ex-Mormons like ultimately do know that. I mean, a lot of us would probably say like the ends don't justify the means. Like maybe the church does provide a solid community that is helpful to a lot of people in certain ways. But like women's bodies and lives are not acceptable collateral damage for that. Like the human psyche is not acceptable collateral damage for that. We're fueling this like multi-billion-dollar engine that, maybe it's helping some people get education, but it's also robbing a lot of people of education as well. I mean, specifically women, if we're being honest.
It's true. It's true. Let's play a couple. You mentioned Layla. Let's play a clip that we have. A couple clips around this theme of standards and patriarchy and
he could be Mormon, doesn't have to not be, but I'm like, I just don't want that double standard of like, we can't do this, and this, but we can have sex.
He was literally my ex-cookie.
Yeah, like
She didn't like drinking or any of that. Would give me shit for doing that, but then one time we went to church together. 5 minutes into us getting home, he's like trying to like rip off my dress, like
exactly.
And I'm like, maybe we should wait like a couple hours. We did just get home from church.
Yeah. There you have it.
What's wrong with a little post-church sex, everybody? Come on.
It's like right after a couple of hours.
I mean, this just pointed out to me the self-serving nature of, and also I guess more so the way that a Mormon man can seemingly judge someone like Taylor or Layla and be like, don't drink coffee, don't drink alcohol. Heaven forbid that you're seen doing those things. Oh, but I want to have sex with you. So that one doesn't matter as much. When in the hierarchy of Mormon sins, sex is very, very, very much worse than those other things. And I do think systems like Mormonism, when you do have all these different rules, not everyone does, but it does give people grounds to be hypocritical in that way and kind of pick and choose where it serves them and where it doesn't.
Should we play the second clip?
Let's do it.
All right, let's play the second clip.
I think that's something that's common in Utah is that we almost like correlate being a member with like, if they don't have that, they're not raised with like good values, which like you can still be a good person and not be a member. Most of my friends weren't Mormon. So I feel like I knew that like obviously people can have like good morals and values, be a good person without being Mormon.
My
like,
parents just said it might make things more difficult. Like when you have kids, if you're passionate and you want to be Mormon and he doesn't, then you
having a split faith marriage for sure. Yeah, for like sure. Would be hard.
Oh, Mayci's defensive.
Yeah, she is. She gets defensive a few times here, which is really interesting. I think it's when they start to kind of dissect like the elements that aren't even just like cultural parts of Mormonism, but that are literally doctrinal parts of Mormonism, that like Mormons are just better than everyone. Like we're the only people that are going to make it to heaven. And I think that's kind of where Mayci's cognitive dissonance is really coming into play. And she's doing a lot of what I think a lot of people, like the Mormons in your comments who are saying, well, I haven't felt oppressed, is not looking at systems and is just looking at personal experience. And I think that is just like a really harmful way of, especially responding to someone being really honest and being really vulnerable in that moment when Layla is talking about like her lived experience, to kind of jump at this, like, well, I haven't had that. I think that's a really common way that we as humans want to like push away from like systemic criticism and try to just like make it more about our own personal lived experience.
And you constantly see like the more Mormon people in the show, like Jen, saying it's cultural issues, it's not doctrine. Totally. But it's like when she was talking with the dancer, it's like, well, the family, a proclamation to the world, is doctrine. Like the first presidency all signed that. So it's not just cultural to be homophobic, Yeah. But it's like they keep like relying on that as their excuse.
And wanting these things to exist in a vacuum.
Yeah.
I think I particularly bristled at this moment with Mayci because two reasons. The one thing is that kind of separation of doctrine and culture, which I think is those things inform each other so completely that you cannot separate them because that's where the culture comes from. And I feel like it was condescending of her to be like, well, I'm from California, so duh. And like, you're naive. It felt like she was trying to call Layla naive, which I bristle at as like a Utah raised Mormon, because I'm like, yeah, I was, but that's because I was a product of the environment that I was put inside of, you know, like how much can I do as a teenage girl living in Provo, Utah? And you're still going to internalize those messages, because that's what I thought. I thought you had to be Mormon to essentially be a good person in the most reductive terms. So for someone just to be like, well, you know, that was your interpretation of it, feels really unfair. Also, because even if the interpretation that Mayci had was different, is she not able to at least validate, like, oh yeah, I can see how you might interpret it that way, and I can understand that. It's an immediate like, well, that's not real, and you were just wrong. There's nothing about the church that, you know, she's making it, I think, seem like a personal failure on behalf of Layla, which I think it absolutely is not.
It has a bit of the energy of like, oh, you didn't see the 1978 Friends where they talked about the seer stone? That's on you, babe. You should have known that as a child.
It's one of those weird compartmentalizing parts of Mormonism, because if you go up to any active LDS person and say, do you believe that Mormons are superior to everyone else in the world? They're going to be outraged at how ridiculous and offensive that question is, and 100% will say, oh no, that's a horrible question. Why would you even ask that? And yet they'll get up in sacrament meeting and so-and-so left the church and I'm just so sad for them, and or so-and-so died, and so they're going to have the gospel to, you know, help them through it, but I feel so bad for all the other people in the world that don't have the gospel. Like, don't we all agree that we were all taught that everyone else who's not active LDS is inferior?
Yes.
And yet we would all have denied that if we were asked point blank, if we...
Well, even in ways like, I've thought about this a lot with, I mean, you see it in only get married to a return missionary. Babysitters, your babysitter should be Mormon. If she's a Mormon girl, then you're safe. That's literally teaching people. I mean, I don't know if I was the only one who internalized that, but it was like, oh, they're Mormon, they're safe, they're good. They went on a mission, they're safe, they're good. And then I get out on a mission and I'm looking around and I'm like, this doesn't feel like a good metric anymore, because these are all just people with, you know, they're just people. Going on a mission doesn't make anyone morally superior, obviously.
Only date a return missionary.
Exactly. I mean? And I feel like that kind of thinking, even if it's not like we Mormons think we're better than everyone else, again, that's why it frustrates me so much that Mayci is unwilling to live at least a little bit in that nuance of like, and then there's a clip of her right after that and she's like, well, not all Mormon men, because like my husband is like so great. And it's like, that's awesome. And and he does seem like an awesome Mormon guy. I don't think he's a bad person because he's Mormon. And how is that preventing you from seeing that there is a real problem with Mormon men and hypocrisy? Those two things can also exist at once, but it's too damaging to her worldview to even go there. And I think that's when people in these high demand, rigid structures, they lose a little bit of their empathy, because if they go there and they empathize, all of a sudden their whole worldview is threatened. And so they're just unwilling to show like sometimes what I think is somewhat basic, like compassion and validation.
It's interesting the points that cause friction, because she was at the gay pride event being like, I'm an ally and the church is wrong about this, you know, kind of fundamental thing. But then that right there, like, got to her.
Interesting. Yeah. I didn't even think about that. Like, some things she's willing to say that, but then other things are just like completely not. Yeah.
Wait, she's compartmentalized?
Yeah, no, you guys are just totally like hitting the nail on the head of all the reasons I wanted to include this clip. It just stood out to me so much because initially I was like so thrilled and like jumped in my seat, so excited that Layla brought up such an important point of analyzing Mormonism. I was like so excited. Oh, let's get into this conversation. I totally agree. And then after being so excited, I was like so crushed when Mayci just immediately like kind of squashed it. And I totally agree with the word condescending, and it just felt like a bit rude to me. And I imagine Layla felt the same way. I've just like shut down and like, oh, okay, you know, I guess my point's not valid. Like, it just felt bad for her in that moment. And it was just like a high for me and then a low. And yeah, just found it frustrating. And I also just found it once again so predictable of Mayci to be giving like the most basic Mormon response, as she did with the like, oh, she shouldn't have left the church. This is why we don't drink. Like, she's just giving the most basic Mormon responses while also trying to act like I live the best version of the church, but she's really just living like the most mainstream version of the church to me, and then also trying to be down like, I don't know. I find her really confusing, and that moment really annoyed me from her.
Yeah, I feel like Mayci's in a really precarious position. I think she's acting as like the most devout of the women. She's acting as like a missionary to them, while also trying to be like the cool Mormon who's not going to judge her friends for leaving too much, maybe just like a tiny bit. And I think I imagine this is probably a really tricky part about like social dynamics with friend groups that are mixed Mormon and mixed ex-Mormon, mixed progressive Mormon. Like there is a little bit of this tension, I think, between like Mormons and there's a huge tension between Mormons and post-Mormons within Utah. But in this friend group in particular. And I also think like thinking of Mayci's role as the missionary, not just to her friends, but to the world, especially where they see that the show has taken off. She's the one who is going to be like standing in for what Mormon doctrine looks like. And I imagine she feels a lot of pressure to make Mormonism seem as appealing as possible. And to like in these moments be like, no, I promise we're not too weird. Like, I know that I stand for this. And like, because I stand for this, I have to show that it's actually fine. And I think she probably has these pre-planned moments of like, yeah, I'm going to be an ally. And I would imagine that that may be a part of the discussion based on like Chase has said on Instagram that like all of the women are MAGA except for Layla and Miranda. And I wonder if that played a role in them discussing this, trying to like take a stand in a small way, but in a somewhat significant way, to be able to talk about like legislature online on the show. But that was pre-planned, that was decided. And so she's taking like calculated risks, I think, as when she's going to kind of push back against Mormonism and when she's not, kind of thinking about like how the perception of Mormonism is going to be and how it's going to be received. And I imagine that's just a weird, difficult position for her to be in, and a lot of pressure she probably feels to not make Mormons look too weird.
I also think having read her book, to offer her like understanding of her worldview, she really has gone through like really, really intense things. And most of that was when she was not living the Mormon rules, when she was having sex outside of marriage, when she was drinking. So I really can't understand how now she's found safety and she's found security and structure and stability, particularly after enduring really extreme traumas. I sympathize with her finding safety there, and that defensiveness is so familiar to me. And that's without having kind of that same arc that she has had.
Yeah. I will say there's got to be social benefits to the church, costs and benefits to the church encouraging this Mormon superiority amongst its members. I also know that one of the top 10 reasons people leave the church is when they start traveling around or move outside of Utah, they get corporate jobs or just meet neighbors in other states and they realize, whoa, those Muslims are better than me, or those Sikhs or Hindus are like way more moral or ethical than me. Many a person has come to me saying that at Faith Crisis when they realized that there were large groups of people who were more moral or ethical than the Mormons they grew up with. So it's tricky for the church. We're bumping up on 3 hours. I've got this Layla clip, Layla getting a hair appointment. Should we play that really quick? And we'll start thinking about our closing thoughts. But let's go ahead and, since we've been talking about Layla, let's go ahead and play that clip.
Did they?
So I was like, 10 years ago, do you mean 1978? And then I realized she means the Gospel Topics essay on race in the priesthood, where the church did basically threw God under the bus and said all those super racist things that Brigham Young and others said, from Brigham Young to basically Thomas S. Monson, were the philosophies or ideas of men. They were products of their time.
Still never been a black apostle.
Was that what Alan H. Oaks, he gave like a presentation? I should have looked this up before coming here. But like a couple of years ago, I guess it was probably 2018, right? Because it was like the the anniversary of when the priesthood ban was lifted.
Yeah.
He said something there. I don't think he renounced anything though.
No, they haven't ever given a formal apology to Black members and former members for the priesthood and temple ban on Black people. They've stopped short of that. But in the Race and the Priesthood Gospel Topics essay, they do state that all the prior theories around Black people being less valiant in the pre-existence, and that's why they were given black skin, all the Curse of Cain garbage, which by the way is still in the Doctrine and Covenants and the Book of Moses and the Book of Abraham.
Yeah. Well, and that scripture she references is still in the Book of Mormon,
right.
Because I was looking this up. I did a breakdown episode on this. So I was like, did they renounce that? I was kind of having the same thing. And I didn't find that Gospel Topics essay, but I did see something that in the current Come Follow Me manual, they address this very briefly. And they say something like, the curse was separation from God, and the sign of the curse was dark skin, and we don't know why that's the sign, but they're not correlated.
And it's super dumb because the Book of Mormon says skin of blackness, right?
Which everyone knows is a metaphor.
Yeah, right.
He could have done it any other way. That's all he had access to.
I found that back to the exact Layla moment. I found that moment interesting. And it's like, obviously as an ex-Mormon woman, I'm kind of like, yeah. And then I'm like, oh, like,
great.
And it's fine. Like if it, I want her to find her peace and however she does. And again, I'm not saying like, I think it's good that the church is slowly amending racist policies and doctrines. And it's interesting to see her like open up just a tiny bit about something incredibly significant. And then kind of quickly be like, but, I'll give the church grace here, which again is her prerogative.
But she's basically all out, but like a pinky toenail, right? Like
I think she's probably pretty out. Yeah.
She's out.
Yeah, I do think she is. But I mean, I think she still maybe feels this sense of needing to be like, I'm not trying to call Mayci an active Mormon racist or, like there's still this, and that's what's interesting about these dynamics is any ex-Mormon knows what it's like to have a conversation with a Mormon and something comes up and you kind of have to toe this line of like, yeah, they did, like there's a certain point where you just kind of have to be like, you kind of have to let some things go in certain company. At least I do.
Yeah.
And I would also imagine like, there is such a stigma for people leaving the church, being angry and bitter and like going on podcasts and things like that. And so I imagine Layla's feeling like, I don't want to also become that trope. I mean, I don't know if that's what she's feeling, but I would imagine also like the pressure of a Black woman of not being seen as aggressive or not being seen as angry. She probably feels a lot of that weight also to not be seen as like the angry ex-Mormon who's going to be hypercritical. I think that's one thing that like Mormons are the most frustrated about. You can leave the church, but you can't leave the church alone. I think that stigma even applies to some ex-Mormons as well. Like, oh man, you have ex-Mormons that are normal people, and then you have ex-Mormons who like won't shut up about it. And there is still a divide even among ex-Mormons on how you respond to these things and how forgiving you can be to the church and how much grace you can give to the church. And I think there is a lot of tension there, or to even use the term ex-Mormon, which is interesting. It seems like Jessi's the only person who has taken on the label ex-Mormon and is comfortable with that. And the other women are much more hesitant to use that and take on that persona.
Yeah, but they're almost all out.
Yeah.
I think.
I also wonder how much of that is production because the show's called Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I wonder if they're like, you got to kind of pretend to be somewhat Mormon.
Keep the Mormon stuff.
Yeah, that's the title of the show. It can't just be Mayci. Yeah.
Well, we didn't even cover all the stuff we planned to cover today for episodes 1 through 5. So we have to have at least one more episode, maybe two. I want to give you all a chance to kind of come up with any closing thoughts you have, and you also feel free to plug anything you want to plug. I will just say I'm surprised at how I didn't watch season 2. I was kind of just not in a place where I was feeling it. So it's been weird to re-engage with season 3, having missed most of season 2 and feeling surprised at how deep the treatment of important Mormon topics is in season 3. It is legit. It's covering topics that so many of us have wanted to be part of a national conversation for decades. And it takes freaking, what was his name? Peanut butter cheese slice.
Our,
what was
our
his name?
bacon friend.
Our bacon friend,
I
like-
hope you stay tuned for the next episode.
We're gonna drag this out for you, Bacon Grace.
Thank you, Grace.
You
Thank you,
feud.
too. Yeah, like it's taken the secret lives of Mormon wives to bring to national and international consciousness topics that we've wanted to see for 150, 200 years. So anyway, let me give each of you a chance to give final closing thoughts and to plug whatever you want to plug. But I do want to thank all of you for your hard work in making today possible. Brooklyn, I don't mean to single you out, but it's been so fun. What do y'all think, panel? Brooklyn, thumbs
Brooklyn,
up, thumbs
10
up,
out
or
of
thumbs
10.
down? What, Alyssa? Thumbs up, thumbs down on
yeah,
Brooklyn.
absolutely.
Alyssa, thumbs up. Yeah, double thumbs up. Samantha. Yep. So Brooklyn, I think you're in. So
Vote you into Mom Talk.
Yeah, thanks guys. Yeah, lots of thumbs up for all of you. So I just enjoy being, able to be an audience to the super important conversation, and I just think you're all super smart women, and I love having these conversations. Just reiterating again, John, that's why I think it's important we have these episodes. And when do these conversations ever get a bigger platform than being on a Hulu series? So yeah, super grateful to all of you guys for being so smart and saying all the right things.
well, we couldn't do it without you, Brooklyn. So thanks for all you do. And it is weird that all these talk shows are talking about like the sexual scandal or the relationship stuff, but there aren't many really hitting these deep themes. So I'm glad we're doing it. Anyway, Samantha, closing thoughts and plugs.
I think I'm just excited to continue dissecting this. I feel like there's a lot of other great themes coming up that will be interesting. I don't really have anything to plug. My YouTube channel is Zelph on the Shelf. My Substack, there's an essay about the movie Baby Girl on there that just feels so relevant to a lot of this Jessi stuff. So if you're interested in that.
Don't you do coaching? You still do coaching, right?
Yes, I do faith transitions coaching still.
How do people contact you about that?
I mean, you can find me anywhere and it will be linked, but it's SamanthaShelleyCoaching.com.
Shelley with an EY.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm your hype man.
You always remind me of the coaching, and I'm like, shit.
All right. If you need a good life coach, Samantha's got a lot to offer. Anyway, thanks for coming. Also, thanks for helping us with the production. You were an important part of today's production.
Darn, I let you down.
No, you didn't. You did great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Hayley, plug away
Yeah.
and summarize away.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm excited to continue this. This is my Super Bowl. It's my favorite thing to do. I told John, he's like, thanks for coming. I'm like, it takes very little to get me to come and talk about this topic.
Made me so happy. You're like, yes!
Yeah, like, please ask me.
We got Hayley.
Yeah, that was a big get for you.
I love doing this. I love doing this with you all. So thank you, John, for providing this platform. You can find me at Girls Camp Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. I also have a YouTube channel. I actually have my breakdown of the season. I touch on similar things, kind of get into other things as well. It's today, Tuesday. That goes live tomorrow. So if you have not yet had enough bacon grease, I hope to see you there over on my YouTube channel to talk further about the secret lives of Mormon wives.
And you've interviewed how many of them so far?
I've interviewed Jessi only, but
Okay.
I'm in talks of interviewing 2 other cast members.
Fun.
Yeah, so excited to. Anytime
They just ignore me. They just ignore me.
Yeah, it's nice to be in the same demographic. I think it helps.
Or do a better job. Maybe?
No.
Or know the subject matter way better.
Yeah, watch the show.
To be able to dance.
Actually watch the show. Good point. Anyway, all right, Hayley, come back, will you?
Yes, absolutely.
And Alyssa, you brought so much structure and you made the slides and all the stuff. So final thoughts, Alyssa.
Yeah, I mean, love this topic, love this show. I think we're seeing, so much of this season is really, unfortunately, showing like these relationships evolving. And I think Mormonism is a through line, unfortunately. And so I think it's really interesting to kind of see how that's playing out for everybody.
Did you say unfortunately?
I mean, like,
You meant fortunately.
I mean,
I'm
the
kidding, I'm
negatives of Mormonism
Okay,
are unfortunate, but the relevance for us is very fortunate.
Aren't we a narcissistic people? Don't we love to see ourselves
We
talked
love
about?
to see ourselves represented.
Oh yeah, it's the best. I'm like, finally. People understand dirty soda culture. I mean, what more could you want?
Not much more. Anyway, y'all are awesome. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. Thanks also to Julia for her work, post-production and comments, show notes, moderating, and all the things. Thanks to all our viewers, all the people who made great comments. We really appreciate it. Also, thanks to our donors that make all this possible. We couldn't do it without you. Seriously, our ad revenue is a small fraction of what keeps us alive. So thanks to everyone who donates. If you value this content, go donate to Zelph on the Shelf. Go donate to Girls Camp. How do they donate to Alyssa?
I don't know. Venmo me.
Yeah, let's get your Venmo.
Liz
Big on the
likes
screen.
words at Venmo, or what is it?
What was that?
Liz likes words Venmo. What is it?
It's Alyssa Whitbeck Venmo.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah,
All right. Venmo Alyssa.
buy me a coffee. Love it.
Brooklyn, I don't know what Brooklyn's Venmo is, but while you're at it, you can also go to mormonstories.org with any money you have left after Venmoing everyone else here. Go to mormonstories.org/donate, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor, and we'll be able to continue paying these women for their great work and also providing you with more content of value. So we're going to do a part 2.
I mean, how could we not?
If
Yeah.
not more.
When's it
Yep.
happening?
Possibly 3. So you guys vote. If you want just no more, let us know. We'll probably do it anyway. If you want more than one more, let us know in the comments. We'll do more. Anyway, thanks again, Alyssa, Hayley, Samantha, and Brooklyn. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. Be bridge makers and peace builders. Did I say that right? No, peace makers and bridge builders. Take care. Enjoy Secret Lives of Mormon Wives on Hulu. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care.